Good morning and welcome to the City of Helena Administrative Meeting or Training. This training meeting is called to order. I will introduce our City Manager, Rachel, and I will let you have it from here. Ms. Hollishaw, would you take it over, please?
You bet. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
It's early on a Saturday, so I appreciate you all taking time on a Saturday to do this. I know in the observation room, we do have some of our directors on as well, providing support to us as we go through today. If they have questions, and if you all have questions, they can help answer. But I know this is going to be a lot of work today. I think we're just waiting for one more. I'm waiting for one more commissioner. Is O'Laughlin in? Danae, have you seen Commissioner O'Laughlin?
Good morning, everyone. I have not seen Commissioner O'Laughlin log on yet in the attendees or the panelists, so perhaps I'll try and reach out to her directly, and unless
We haven't seen you two, so what?
I'll see what I can do. How's that?
Okay. Thank you, Danae. Oh, there she is. Hi, Heather. Good morning. So my hope is that this is more of a relaxed environment, that you all feel comfortable. I'm going to turn it over to Brenda Morrison here in a minute. I know all of you have met Brenda. Brenda's our facilitator today. She's with Engaged Public. She's going to bring us through the agenda and through some facilitation. The team and I will stay in the background, and she'll really help move you through it. She's also a part of the team that manages the budgeting tool. It just jumped out of my brain because it's a Saturday morning and it's early. The budgeting tool that we'll be using online as well. So after today, we'll be using what you all decide are your strategic outcomes and focus areas to align the budget, so we can communicate to you how, as a team, we're implementing activities specific to what you'd like to see happen in the community and priority. So that said, I wanted to ask Commissioner O'Laughlin and the mayor if you could send me your homework, and I can start getting that information prepared for the next steps of the conversation. So if you wanted to prioritize which ones first, it would be the norms and guiding principles. So if you looked at last night, that'll be the first thing we're going to talk about. If my email last night, I shared the kind of the priorities. If you go back to the report itself and pull up some of those, you'll see those principles that were offered up, and add anything else you'd like and just email them over, and I'll start synchronizing them for you guys. And I'll turn it over to Heather. And Commissioner Logan, thank you. I will start every meeting with you too. I appreciate that. So I'd like to introduce Brenda Morrison. Brenda Morrison is our facilitator from Engaged Public. One thing we didn't do on that agenda, Brenda, was talk about breaks. So maybe you can talk about how we would move through the process, exactly, copy on today, and then how you'll want to move them into breaks and so forth. So thanks, Brenda.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, in terms of breaks, just let me know when you need one. How about that? I'm sure we'll need at least 2 today just to stand up, get some more coffee. So just let me know when you need one, and we're just happy to break. But if you don't ask, then I'll probably just insert one at some point. So thanks a lot. Good morning. I've met you. I think I've met you all, and again, it's a pleasure to be with you here today. It was great meeting all of you individually and learning more about Helena, and I appreciate your willingness to take time. So let's just get going. I just, again, just want to know that our firm works with public servants all over the world. We really, and I do personally, just have a great appreciation for what you do and the time you're putting in, including this morning, because I know all of you have other things, other jobs, families that you would like to be with at this point in time. So we're just going to try to move through this agenda efficiently today. So just get going. Just in terms of just a couple of housekeeping items for today. Yes, if you need a break, take one. Just let us know in the chat, or just let us know, raise your hands. We need to take 5 minutes, so we'll do that. You all are used to conducting meetings on Zoom, so I'm sure this is not an issue, but just because meetings recorded, just we can talk one at a time. Please share the air, and just try to be hard on ideas and not on people. Just getting going. I synthesized the information in the report that you said, and I think you all have seen a copy of that. And there's just a lot of good things happening in Helena, and there's a lot of things that you agree on. And I think you all said that, is that substantively, there's, you all want the best for the city. You're all in it. You're all in this position for the right reasons. You're community oriented. You want Helena to progress in a smart way as it grows. And you agree on many, many items. On the other hand, there are some things that are kind of slowing you down, slowing your progress. You all want to have a really good year. You want to get a lot of things done in the next 12 months, but there are just kind of some procedural matters that are kind of hindering your progress, as it could be. And so I'm hoping today that we can address some of these procedural issues that can help build some trust and some mutual respect, and that can lead to some greater results. Danae, do I share my screen, or do I share my screen, or is that how you guys work?
Yeah, Brenda, it's totally up to you. I have the PowerPoint downloaded, or you have the ability to share as a panelist too. So your call.
Yeah. Okay. I'll just share my. Okay. I'll just share my screen. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. It's very large to me right here. Okay. So I think I apologize for the not so great graphic, but throughout some work that I've done over the years, this triangle, this work of durable agreements, is kind of been proven to demonstrate that 3 sides of this triangle have to be functioning, really to get work, to have a really strong, durable agreement. And while you guys agree again substantively on the issues, some of the other proceed how the work gets done is impacting things. It's impacting the relationships, it's impacting trust, and it's impacting your results. So we may refer to this a couple times today. I did put this in the report, but it's something that you got to consider as you're making decisions. Is have people's needs been met, and begin to think about that. All right, if I, if we want to get something done, look at the other 2 sides of the triangles. I don't want to belabor this point, so just keep it in the back of your head. Today's objectives, which you have on your agenda, is really all of you want a and the residents want an efficient and governing culture, positive governing culture in Helena. And so we're going to be working on considering the adoption of guiding principles and norms to guide your work this year, to reframe administrative meetings to commission study sessions. Going to look at training on the Montana Open Meetings Law, and what Rachel just referred to as establishing some strategic outcomes and key focus areas for 2021. So that is our objective today. Anybody have any thoughts, questions, comments? Okay, keep going. All right. One thing that I thought we'd do maybe a little differently today is I'd ask if you would consider making these decisions today by consensus. And by consensus, I mean a solution that you can support, that you can live with. Maybe not love, maybe it's not your first choice, but live with. And that's kind of the definition of consensus making decision. It's not unanimity. It's not that, you know, we all agree. It's not, but it is something that all of you can live with. The reason I'm asking you guys to consider this today and not using a simple majority vote, which is what you make most decisions as, is because these kinds of procedural issues that you're examining, the norms, it would be great if all of you agreed, because normal simple majority is really basically, there's winners and losers. There's always a winner, there's winners and losers. And in order for these procedural, these things to work, all of you kind of have to buy in. And if you, to be honest, if you don't buy in, then there's probably just no point in going forward with it. So I'm going to ask if you can think about making some decisions by consensus today. And as I said, it's a little different. And if for some, you know, and usually what I tell a group is if they can't make a decision by consensus, we can fall back on simple majority vote. But I suspect I would not suggest that today. So if we can't make a decision by consensus, then things just stay the way they are. This is the flow chart for consensus making decisions, you know, intuitively, so I don't want to belabor it. And there's 6 processes, but we've introduced an issue, you clarify an issue. The next step is just discussion, making sure everybody's heard. If you can ideas, see where there's some commonality, that's kind of the root of it. And it's in step 3, kind of put together a proposal and test for agreement and see if we can agree. This is the 6 steps. As I said, most of this you're familiar with in just your normal everyday existence. The one thing you may not just be clear about, and I found this graphic, is just how this works. So if everybody agrees, kind of that's the sweet spot. You can agree with reservations and state those, like I agree, but there's a standing aside, which is I'm not going to hold the group back. Maybe but I'll go with it. And then there's a part about blocking, which is there's no consent. And if there's no consent and someone feels strongly about blocking a decision, you can either kind of go back and see if you can hammer it out again, or it just drops. Again, this is kind of what this means. There's agreement fully, there's agreement with reservations, stand aside, and blocking a proposal. And that's really kind of an I don't block it. And when you're considering this, a consensus, it's not just like, yeah, we went along with consensus. It means that you don't go back into the parking lot. I've seen group and just say, I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. It's basically you'll go along with it. So that is what I'd ask if you might consider trying out today. Do you have any thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, objections?
And this is just for purposes of this meeting. That's sort of the ask.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Not for, you know, you'll go back to your normal meeting on Tuesday, use normal decision making, simple, you know, normal majority. Yeah, just for the purposes of this meeting. Okay. All right. Well, let's get going. Rachel, how are you doing on Did I give you enough time there?
Yeah, I have 4 submittals for the norms and guiding principles. I think that's the next item, first item on the agenda here. Is that correct, Brenda?
Yes, but we could,
I just need one more.
you want to switch something around?
I think that might be helpful.
Why don't we just move ahead while Rachel's doing this, and Rachel will skip yours too. Maybe
Well,
we'll go.
Can I ask
to-
if we move on?
Yeah. Is it okay with the group if we just start the training on the open meetings law then? Thomas?
Fine with me.
Okay, and then Mayor Collins, is that all right with you? I know I'm just waiting for yours. I'm sorry to be a pain, but woo, no pressure. Sorry. Okay.
Thomas, are you okay to go next?
Yep, I'm opening up my PDF.
Okay, I'm gonna stop my, I'm gonna stop my share. Do you have a share?
Yep.
Sorry to move you forward. But just while he's kind of his
Okay, I am,
things ready.
the second part of that assignment, I'm trying to complete it. The second part of that, part of it. You do?
So just to frame this up, this came up from all of you in one respect of another, about questions and interpretations about the open meetings law. And I thought it would be really useful if you all could come to, some form of agreement on, or at least understanding on this law. Some of you may choose to personally to interpret it differently than others, but you still may be within the parameters of the law. But I thought it would be super useful to have a discussion about this and to see, and then I have some kind of suggestions for some, maybe some guiding principles for you. But Thomas, you want to take it away?
Sure. Mayor, commissioners, good morning. I just prepared this really basic, simple slide of the 2 provisions relating to open meetings and observation and participation. The first 2 obviously are in the Montana Constitution, sections 8 and 9 of Article 2. Section 8, as you all know, requires government agencies, including the city of Helena, to offer citizen participation before a final decision is made. Generally for the commission, that entails accepting public comment on any proposed action item before the commission makes its decision. That's why the commission takes public comment, even though an item may not be a formal legal advertised public hearing. And then secondly, section 9 is the right to know. It's to observe the deliberations of the public bodies. And I think that's probably where more of our focus is right now. The section 9 requires the commission to allow the public to observe their deliberations unless there's an exception to close it, which you will remember for our purposes is generally for litigation strategy or to talk about a personnel matter. State code, Montana code annotated, drills down a little bit further and provides the details for when those rights are triggered. A meeting, as you'll note, is you have to observe the deliberations of a meeting and you have to have participation, is when there's a quorum. So 5 city commissioners under our bylaws, 3 is a quorum. And it's when you all 3 of you are in a place, and that also includes electronic. So it could be, a Zoom meeting, obviously, an email discussion is a possibility. to hear, discuss, act, or act upon a matter over which the agency has supervision, control, jurisdiction, or advisory power. So at its most basic, it's any time that the three of you get together in an area or discussion over which something the commission may have control, jurisdiction, or advisory power on. And of course, that is a very broad set of terms. And at the end of the day, you know, I advise the commission obviously should avoid meeting three people together to discuss anything related to city business, and generally avoid getting together without notifying the public that you are, even if it's not quite clear whether it's one of these issues or over supervision, control, jurisdiction, or advisory power. It's not hard to do a PSA and let the public know that the three of you are going to get together in some place, even though it may not technically be a meeting in which you're going to discuss. You may not even discuss anything. I think the difficulty is there are no black and white answers with regard to a lot of these issues, other than the three of you to get together and you're going to discuss, you know, something on a city agenda or something that obviously the city discusses and has decision ability over. But you know, I can't give you a black and white answer. My job is to define and limit risk for you in the city, and every situation is different. It's so fact-based. I don't feel comfortable giving that black and white, this is or is not a meeting. This is something that needs public notice. As a result, I think generally the commissioners, you all have to make your individual decisions as to what behavior you're most comfortable with. Obviously, myself and the manager are available to help guide you in that. But again, just broadly speaking, once we're beyond that easy decision of three of you in a room or an email meeting or discussion, it gets to be pretty gray. And I think the facts of the situation matter most. That's my takeaway from the case law, is it can't, one case can't apply to everything, and we have to look at it on a case-by-case basis.
So Thomas, legally, if two commissioners meet to, because there's questions perhaps, or they get on the phone because they don't understand an issue, or a resident in a constituent has brought something up in their district, you know, and they're not entirely familiar with it, and you know, one calls another and says, hey, you know, I got a call from somebody who lives near you and they're concerned about this. Do you know the history of that? That is within and fully within the purview of the law, correct?
I believe so, yes. That's not a meeting of the commission.
Right. So, you know, so there's some of you that would not do that, but but just so you know, and that is just exactly like what what Thomas said is up to you. But if two commissioners do that, it is within the purview of the law. And so for those of you that don't feel comfortable doing that, that's up to you. But what I would suggest is that to not judge or look at others that do that as saying, as believing that they are in violation of the current law. Because to be honest, most of these open meeting laws around the country, and I looked at a bunch just in preparation for this meeting, are exactly as Thomas said. There's a lot of gray area. Some states have gone to court. There's more documentation because they've gone to, you know, their Supreme Courts or whatever. But there is some utility to sometimes communicating before a meeting if there is some, you know, if there is facts to be gained and understanding that you need. So I put together just a just a slide for our, just to kind of get us talking about this, to see if you all might be able to reach some agreement on what's appropriate. And I didn't wordsmith this a lot either, but whoops, wrong slide. Okay. So just
Do you need me to
the
stop?
boundaries of the legislation for 2 members to speak does not violate the law.
What's that, Thomas? Sorry.
I was gonna say, do you need me to stop sharing, Brenda?
Oh, yes. Oh, can you not see mine? Yeah.
We
Okay.
can see the slides.
Can you see mine?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. All right. So I just thought for our conversation, I just put together a couple points. Just exactly what I said. It's within the boundaries of the law for 2 people to speak. But it's the time not to possibly use that time for a better understanding, discussion of an issue, not to conduct a deliberation that should be held in public. So, you know, a lot of you too, I know that Heather works at the legislature, Emily works at the legislature, and you all, you know, see the you know, legislators communicate with each other on and off the floor, you know, talking about a bill, seeing if they can maybe come to some understanding of it, some kind of compromise. So, you know, but, whoa, but maybe agree that use that if you do spend time talking to another member, that you're using that time to understand. Another issue that came up in our conversations is that sometimes when there's some confusion is that when you guys go to a meeting, you just vote. You go there, you vote. And so that maybe there's some reasons why the public wonders if there's been some conversations in the back, because there's no context or rationale about your vote at public meetings. So it's important to give the public an understanding. It doesn't have to, you know, be a missive or a sermon, but, you know, tell them why you're voting how and the reasons. It should be 30 seconds long. And then, of course, you know, this is happening in all forms of government. You know, there's nothing worse, I think, as a constituent when you go up to the legislature and you're testifying, or maybe in front of the city council, and everybody's texting each other while you're talking, and you're wondering what they're texting about, because you're not seeing that. So open meeting laws, I mean, they were designed to encourage transparency. You know, to agree not to use electronic devices during meetings to discuss, you know, matters relevant, you know, to the commissions, because those texts generally aren't shared with the public. So I was wondering what you would think about, you know, what do you think about, for those of you that have questions about this, maybe just open it up for some conversation.
So I might start, Brenda, if that's all right.
Sure.
So as I'm looking through these bullet points, I'm agreeable, very much so, with what's expressed here. I think that 3rd bullet point, for me as an individual, that speaks to me a lot, just in introspectively considering myself as a representative of the people. I tend to sometimes say nothing, sometimes be very, and so I appreciate that that admonition or that reminder. And but the bullets I think make a lot of sense.
Okay, anybody else? Mayor? Not to call you out there.
I fall in the same category sometimes with what Commissioner Logan just said. I would just vote without really expressing my rationale for voting. And I think that I'll have to do better on that. And so that's good that that is brought up. Yeah.
Another just good discussion, because I think that third bullet is a fair point, and I know that this is about open meeting and like how we're communicating. I would also say I think it's important for us to slow down during formal commission meetings and have both the discussion but also the presentations that we often get in admin meetings. Like this has come up multiple times before, that members of the public aren't aware that we've had conversations in advance. And so I would just say to the city manager too, it may slow the meetings down or add some additional time, but I don't think there's harm in providing sort of similar presentations, right? We may have to hear it twice, but the public then gets to hear it. And then we have a little bit of the same conversation we did in admin meetings. Like it sometimes feels awkward because you're like, you members of the commission have already heard me say this, but like, I think that that's just something to be cognizant of, that it may feel repetitive, but it's not necessarily for the members of the public.
You want me to add a bullet point in there to just basically something in there about or remind the public that, you know, we talked about this, you know, we talked about this issue, you know, on November 10th or December 10th and January 10th, and we're revisiting it again. But you want me to put a bullet point in there?
Yeah, I mean, I think it could be something like, you know, staff and commission be cognizant that, you know, at formal meetings, we may need to repeat or provide, you know, some historical context of previous conversations that have been had.
To provide additional, to provide context and historical information. We can wordsmith this later, but something like that. We come back to that. That's a great point. Yeah, because you guys do know so much more than the rest of us. And I know from watching my own city council meetings that sometimes I'm like, if I just zoom into one, and I was, you know, obviously I don't sit around and watch the admin meetings because I have a job. You know, I miss out, and it's sometimes difficult to catch up. So that would be appreciative. Emily, it looks like you wanna.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with that addition. I think that it also gives us another opportunity to consider, you know, if we didn't receive public comment in an admin meeting, and people are just getting caught up to consider that. And also, you know, I know that there's times where in between meetings, I'll have someone call me or, you know, email or text and say, can you get me up to speed or what's happening? And that'll, you know, change. It could change the way you're thinking about a particular topic. And so I think having multiple opportunities to consider, you know, whatever's before us is a good thing. I also would add to, I do appreciate the second bullet point. I know one way that I've always thought about open meeting law is, you know, you can have conversations that are informational but shouldn't be deliberative. And so that's one of the ways that I've, you know, thought about things, and the second bullet point gets to that, and I appreciate that. And also I think that one thing that I've noticed just, you know, being in the first year too, is that, and coming from being a citizen watching, I do think going to what the mayor and Commissioner Logan said, having at least, you know, some conversation or discussion about rationale, I think does help the community, and also just for historical record too. I think that's good. One other thing I would note is that you know, I know that, and I'm sure others probably feel the same way, that, you know, the legislature, I don't necessarily want the legislature to be our bar because they, as we see on a daily basis, don't even meet their own bar frequently. So something to keep in mind.
That's true.
um, and really, you know, hopefully set a standard.
You know, though, I mean, citizens do expect efficiency in government. They really do. So they do want, I think, you know, I mean, while transparency is important, they want to hear what you have to say. They also want you to operate efficiently. They don't want your meetings to go for 5 hours. They don't want you to stay up till 2 in. They don't want to stay up till 2 in watching your meetings. So that work that can be done, questions that you have of one another, questions that you have of the staff. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in Rachel's section 2. Use that time to ask questions of each other, to ask questions of the staff. You know, there's minutia that, to be honest, the public is not as interested in, because that's why they elected you to go down into the minutia. They don't want the minutia. But so we have questions that that dig down into detail, that you know, then use the opportunities that are afforded to you. That is including talking to one another. If you know that there is someone on the commission that sees an issue differently, take the time to ask one another, hey, I don't get what you see. Can you explain it to me? That's a good use of a one-on-one conversation so that you can really have an effective and efficient conversation at your public meeting. It doesn't mean that someone is necessarily violating the law. It means that hopefully you are clarifying a point so that you can operate more efficiently as a body. Anybody else wanna?
Sure, I'll weigh in. I will say that I appreciate this discussion to the extent we are working towards any sort of consensus build with regard to our activity today. You know, I won't be part of this one. This was not my understanding of what we were working towards when we unanimously approved the agenda on Wednesday. I've made my opinions clear about what the law is and what we can do with regard to avoiding the law or not avoiding the law or imposing restrictions on people. That's not to say that I don't agree with these 5 bullet points or that I disagree with any given one. I fundamentally do not believe it is our responsibility or our prerogative to control any commissioner's ability to operate within the bounds of the law. And that's if we're working towards that, that's inappropriate. Right. I know, Brenda, you've done a great job of walking on eggshells on some of this, right? We've all done bullet point 1. We've all done bullet point 2, right? We can all just say that and we can get it out of the way. Except, you know, we've all conducted deliberations about public business with one-on-ones. I mean, that's just a fact for the 5 of us. Right. So at least like we can acknowledge those, and what constitutes public deliberations and what constitutes informational stuff is always going to be a squishy gray line. And if someone wants to follow it and someone doesn't, that's not my place to police, right? And they can do that, and I wouldn't even know what's happening, and like sally forth and do. And so I think this is great in terms of people articulating their personal expectations, setting boundaries for themselves, what they would aspire to. But I do not think this commission, one, could agree to an interpretation that violated the law, like went below, say 4 of us can meet and it won't constitute a quorum. That would be a problem. I also don't think this commission has the power to tell, you know, I can't tell Commissioner Dean she cannot pick up the phone and call the mayor and say, I want to vote on this thing and this is why. I think that would be wrong of me. That would interfere with her ability to do that. So again, you know, I think this is great. This is aspirational. I don't necessarily disagree with what individuals have said, but I do not think it's our place to to create this list for anybody.
Yeah. Point noted. But which I think this is what, I think the attorney, Thomas said, I mean, there's so much of this is gray and it is subjective, and it is up to all of you to, decide, what you're, how you're going to conduct yourself as an elected official. Mayor, do you want to weigh in?
Oh,
It's only because your mic was off. That's the only reason I thought.
oh, my mic is on.
I mean, it's on. It's on. It's on.
Well, I think Commissioner is, and he's right. Most of us we've done these things, and we haven't done them out of malice or trying to get at anything. Sometimes you want to just see where others are, yeah, I agree. All of these are pretty close to gray areas where we could be walking on eggshell, whether we're doing the right thing. But I know one thing for sure. I've always tried to maintain where there are two or more, I will not attend. I will not be a part of that, because that one day, I mean, you can really manage that. So.
Others? So, just to be honest, just talking about consensus, like Commissioner Halliday just basically said he's not going to go with this, but it would just to be clear, are you kind of would you object? So this isn't going anywhere. This was just a clarifying point, but there was maybe some conversation that maybe bullet points 3 and 4 could be adopted as part of a norm.
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Yeah, no, so I already made my, I mean, I explained this to the manager and city attorney the other day when this original agenda item was out, and explained that there's no room fundamentally for me to have a discussion on the interpretation of open meeting laws. I fundamentally disagree that you can clip a commissioner's wings, whether you like them, whether you hate them, whether you think they're the worst human being in the world, or they're your best friend. There's no room for it. That said, I'm not disagreeing with any of these points. I mean, we could walk through bullet point, and I will smile at some and agree. I'll point out problems with others. I don't want to waste our time on it. Like, you can ask me if I like them or not, but I don't want to give you a 20-minute treatise on the benefits of, whether everyone should weigh in on a specific issue or only one. I think it's wonderful what I've heard from some. I disagree with what I've heard from others. But again, we agreed on Wednesday that this was going to be informational. So to the extent that we're doing this, like, again, feel free to adopt them and live by them. I will live by some of these. I may not live by others, but I refuse to tell the mayor, I refuse to tell Commissioner Logan, Commissioner Dean, that this is what they have to live by. And I would hope that they would respect that they can't tell me to live by it either. And that we can just fundamentally move on and do our business in accordance with the law and any personal values we all want to live by, so long as they comport with the law. And I don't want to be a sticking point on it. It's a fundamental disagreement that we have the ability to interfere with one another's political speech.
That's great. So what it was good is that, as I am hoping, and I respect what you're saying, Commissioner Halliday, because it is such a gray area, is that maybe for some of you, it's just understanding, again, that informationally, this is the deal. And so if you choose not to do it, and you don't want to do that, that's fine. But for others that do, and just exactly what Commissioner Halliday said, it's up to them. It's up to each one. It's up to each person. And maybe in terms of these, and again, not being able to tell someone else what to do, these might be able to be considered to be part of this norms discussion that we're going to have. So thanks for this. Thomas, did you have anything more you want to say?
No, no, Brenda.
Anybody else have other questions about the open meetings law? All right. Rachel, you want to go back?
Ready.
Ready. Okay. I'm going to stop my share. Okay. Here.
It's my hope is that I don't make you all sick, because what I did was I kind of color coded. Many of you, I know the director, Danielson, she kind of got a giggle out of me trying to organize myself, but sometimes I'll color code things. And so I had to color code your responses to the norms exercise so that I could try and synchronize what were some key elements that you were all really saying. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We're going back to the beginning of the agenda, which is the specific norms that you all agreed were, or that you all were synchronizing across as priorities. So hold on, I'm going to share my screen.
So many cities across the United States and across the world adopt some form of norms or principles. Sometimes it changes depending on the council members that are there. It's normal. It's, to be honest, they're, you know, it's not like it would be weird. You see them all the time. Many, as I said, you can just Google it, there's hundreds that show up. And it's just basically some principles, some guidelines that help in those procedural areas that can help build trust. If they're not in the city charter, no one votes on them. It's just some things that you all decide yourselves, and the next group of commissioners could decide they don't like them or do like them or want to add to them or change them. But they're going to say that these guidelines are going to help us work collaboratively to be more efficient, to get more things done. And sometimes it works, and many cities, they've developed a culture of this over the years, and it's just how it is. So, wow, okay, Rachel, you're gonna have to explain the color coding.
Yeah. So on the left-hand side is column A. And in column A are the synchronizing of, I read each of them to try and pull out kind of key areas that you were all noting. And I also wanted, so I'm gonna zoom way out so you can see. So what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, each of you submitted a long list of different norms and guiding principles that you liked. And so we can have each of you talk about them, Brenda, if that's what you would like to have them do. Okay, yeah. And so I think you all will probably recognize your answers. I won't have, you can kind of go ahead and step out with them. And I tried to color code them on the left-hand side. So
is there any way you can make it larger, Rachel?
You bet, you bet. I'm just going to zoom in here. But in general, these were the things that I saw. They may not be what you, and we can go through this and see if you agree. Be kind, respect, govern, share, disagree agreeably, and do the work, process, and team. So those were the themes that I saw within the conversation, or within each of the pieces that were, each of the items that you submitted. And so number 1, I think you know who you are. And then number 1 also submitted, and number 1, I could call them, maybe not number 1, maybe we'll give you a symbol so that no one knows that, you know, that there's no relationship to a particular one commissioner's number 1, or there's a preference or anything like that. So that makes it less.
So like the purple, those came into just being responsive to constituents.
Yes,
And that was in several, okay, so several people said that's how you got it, like,
column one
okay,
is the first, column C, column D, column E,
okay.
F, G. And then again, I just tried to synchronize. So purple, do the work. Seemed like a lot of people talked about doing the work. There was one around teamwork, a couple around being kind, disagree agreeably, a few,
Okay.
and
So,
you on
yeah.
top.
Let's just open this up for some conversation because there does seem to be some agreement on some of these. Does anybody want to kick this off and talk about just this exercise and you know what you said, why you said it?
And I can start off. I didn't say this, but that be kind. Can we elaborate on that? Because quite frankly, I don't know of well, maybe there are, but I have not noticed people not being kind or being respectful. So can someone elaborate on that, be kind?
So I just pulled that out as a theme of these 3 boxes.
Okay, so no one, did anyone specifically say that, or did you kind of just?
Oh,
Yeah, that was just a,
okay, I got you.
yeah. I can
Okay.
Yeah, we
put
can't
something
read
else,
that.
be nice. Or let's see here. It's more like
No.
your method, perhaps. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I understand, Rachel.
Integrity. Got it. Okay.
But
All right. So I guess first of all, I mean, this did come out, and several of you said that you would be supportive of adopting some kind of guiding principles, norms, and expectations for your interactions with each other. And having now kind of looked at what other communities do, other cities, what do you think? Let's just start first there before we kind of get into specifics.
you know, I would start by saying this. Some of what we're going through now is because of sometimes it's because of what we've watched done in previous administration and all of that. Because just this morning, I listened to us talk about reiterating what we said in the administrative meeting for the other meeting. And we take, for instance, when a resident comes into one of the meeting and does not come into the second meeting, and we did not reiterate what we're saying, and we start to vote on that, that resident thought process is, oh, they must have discussed that in the corner because they're already voting on it and we never heard about it. And so in order for that residents to be able to understand everything, they must have attended both meetings. But and so now that we're coming to this, and then others will see that as not being transparent because they didn't follow both meetings. And so when we come up here and say we need to be transparent with the community is seeing it one way, and some of us are looking at it other way. What else could we have done? What we have followed were the rules we have down. We discuss it this meeting, we vote on it the next meeting. But in the residents' eyes, that was not transparent because we didn't do what we're supposed to do because they didn't attend both meetings. And so that's where some of these issues come from.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe some of that can be just done by just reminding residents, you know, when they're doing that exactly that restating as you're voting, that you're reminding, which is what Heather suggested.
Yeah.
Which is just reminding residents, just for the record, that you've discussed it 4 times,
Right.
5 times, or, you know, it's been on the agenda for a year. You've gone through it, and you know, if they want to, they could call you or call a staff member and
I
understand
look through the record.
the conversation.
Yeah.
But we could put, you know, as I said, that bullet point that was on that other spine to explain your rationale for votes and give historical context. That could be part of your norm, you know, is that, and it could be the staff doing that, or it could be you.
You bet.
But that's a great point that Heather made earlier, and it seems to resonate.
Yeah.
What else, Emily?
I was just going to say, building off that, I think the mayor makes a good point of, you know, if a resident comes to one meeting and not another. I think one thing that would also probably help with that in terms of them getting a full background, not just of recent meetings, but you know, they're not going to go back and look at multiple agendas. And so I think the easier that we can make it in linking to relevant documents and, you know, previous conversations. And I know Danae's doing a lot of great work on basically getting everything digitized and our videos, you know, available. And so I think the more opportunity that we can provide that documentation and, you know, every time that comes up will be helpful to residents, and we can always refer people to those, you know, in being prepared.
But back to this, Mayor, I'm just going to put you slightly on the spot. Are you in favor of adopting some form of norms and expectations for this council? If you could agree on five, six bullet points?
I don't have I don't see a problem with that at all. You know, it's just more respectful and caring for the others, that we're all on the same page. So personally, I don't have a problem with it.
Sean, do you want to talk a little bit?
Sure. I do actually. I think this is probably as important a thing as we can discuss today. I had members of the public that you know, I don't know particularly well, that have attended our meetings, whether they were in person or whether they, you know, have been on the Zoom platform. And again, it's not friends, or I mean, it's just people that I know in the community. And really and I got to say, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but I've heard it from staff as well. You guys really don't get along very well, do you? And so, you know, it gets kind of down to figuring out why. And I think that's why we're here. And Brenda, I must say that your interview was very helpful in trying, you know, to ask myself what the deal is. And I think toward the end of our conversation, I felt like if there was one thing I could say, and I think it's reflected in sort of the things that I chose about norms or guidance or expectations or whatever, guiding principles, was, as we finished our conversation up, I said, you know, it's okay to disagree. And I'd have to say, for me, as I look back over the course of the last year, that's been one of the biggest sort of internal struggles. So there's 5 of us. We're going to each bring our own perspective to the table on whatever issue it happens to be. We might agree, we might disagree, but how we process that, I guess, as a body, makes a lot of difference in terms of how we're seen as a governing body. I can remember, and I don't specifically remember what the issue was. I mean, I brought it up at a budget work session, which seems like so long ago now. But it was certainly an outlier opinion. You know, not in the norm, but it was my perspective nonetheless. And I can remember being described as being in a tizzy. So, you know, you have enough of those exchanges, and it really kind of, it sort of, I don't know, tempers your speech a little bit. Like you maybe don't express yourself as freely as maybe you ought to, or you don't say anything at all, as was pointed out in the discussion about the open meeting laws. I look at myself. But I think this idea that it's okay, and it's not just us that's having that trouble, it's the whole nation and our state. We can't bring divergent ideas together and discuss them in a way that doesn't kind of get personal. And so as I sort of shaped the things that I felt like were important in terms of guiding principles, and that's kind of how I went about it. And I will say very honestly, I've made as many mistakes as any of us. And you know, I want that to change, and I want that to change for us as a body. And so I guess I would say that if we could get to the point where we can decide that it's okay to disagree, that'd be a big start.
Commissioner, would you go back to what you said? If we can get to the point, I didn't hear that. I'm sorry.
Where we can, I guess, agree to disagree.
Oh.
You know, that divergent opinion is okay, that we can respect one another's interests or positions on certain issues, and I don't know, that's a big deal for me here today.
So if I was to look at these lists, it looks like, and look, I know that when you go into the chambers or you go into anywhere and you see this list of aspirational goals, and we've all been in meetings where we've seen this on the wall, and that the meeting, you know, no one respects that. That is absolutely true. But it does demonstrate to your public, if you can, and I think Rachel just showed Bozeman's core values at the bottom, that that you're modeling something to your citizenry, to your governors, that you're trying. Because you are the leaders of your community. You are the de facto leaders. And people do expect things of you. They hold you, you know, they do, whether you want to. I think most of us hold our elected officials to a higher standard. Absolutely. So Rachel just put up Missoula's. There's Bozeman's, there's, you know, and it's not, Missoula's at the top are kind of these, what kind of those guidelines for speaking. At the bottom are just, you know, that's what they're saying to the public. But you look at Bozeman's, it's integrity and you know, leadership, service, and teamwork. I think what I just saw from yours, if I was just doing a little concise, so yours is a little different in that you want responsiveness is a core value, and that responsiveness to each other, the staff, that means to prepare for your meetings well in advance, do your homework so that you're not asking, you know, questions of the staff necessarily, bogging down meeting times, that you're very responsive to each other, that you share ideas, that you ask questions openly during your meetings, whether it's an administrative meeting, whether it's, you know, you're asking someone a question, you know, because you saw them in the hall and want to know, or during the meetings, you're asking, sharing ideas, asking good questions. Kind of, to be honest, is that, you know, real hard on ideas, not on people, that you can disagree agreeably, hard on ideas, not on people. And that respect and consideration and courtesy are the utmost. That's kind of what I, you know, for both the staff and the public and yourselves. Did you agree on those like 4 main points?
Can you repeat those and I'll type them on here?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Responsive, to be responsive to the public. There's got to be a better word than responsive. And that includes responsive to the public. That's all your constituent. That is, you know, that's also being responsive to each other. That means doing your homework, asking questions in advance, so that meetings aren't bogged down. Being responsive to each other, the staff, constituents. That's all of those things in purple. It seems to be to degree to disagree. That's hard on ideas, not on people. Agree to disagree. There's lots of different ways to phrase that.
Okay.
That this body will model respect, consideration, and courtesy, even if your public may not. That would be bullet point 3, I think, Rachel. And then would be number 3. And then the 4th would be to share ideas and questions. And I think some of you wrote that.
Mm-hmm.
Share ideas, ask questions, openly express concerns. That seemed to come up in multiple places. Other ones, or do those seem like they sum up what you're saying?
I guess one thing, you know, it was interesting that when Commissioner Logan was just reflecting on what comments he's received, and so I started thinking about like what's the feedback I've heard from those that have been watching our meetings, and I think that's true. I mean, I think that there's no question that a takeaway often is you all don't seem to get along. The other thing that I think, at least I have heard from folks, and again, like Commissioner Logan, not necessarily people who are aligned with what I'm looking at or focused on the issues that I may be looking at. But another takeaway I've heard is you all can't seem to make decisions and move forward with anything. So I think that the bullet number 1, responsive to the public, you know, this is a question I got in a public meeting or a forum that I was asked to be part of. You know, how are you responsive to your constituents? And I think it is also important to acknowledge that our constituents don't always agree, right? That there isn't just like one set of values or priorities that all of our constituents feel, right? So I think that I think it's also important to acknowledge that when things come to this body, they're not always easy decisions. And I absolutely agree with Commissioner Logan that we all come with different perspectives, and being respectful of those perspectives is important, but also not bashing a decision that's made as if it is not responsive to constituents, right? I mean, I think that I've certainly felt like there are times where there isn't anything being said necessarily in meetings, but then on social media, there seems to be much more willingness to comment, and it's an assumption that perhaps we're not being responsive to constituents. So that would be my thing. I think that it's just, you get into this trap of saying, okay, we want to be responsive to our constituents, and then that's often used as an attack that we're not doing that, or that some of us are not doing that. So I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Is there a better
I
way?
definitely like.
Do you want to reframe some of that, Heather, like that number 1?
I just think that there should be an acknowledgement that we ultimately have to make decisions, right? So I don't know where to put that. And I think maybe it's just
maybe it's just you're in charge. You do have to make decisions. That's why you're elected, right? I mean, you're making decisions. So we could we could put and I think I mean, you're governing, and governing's hard, and it's making decisions, and not everybody will always agree. So we could put something in there. Rachel, maybe put a you were elected to govern. You were elected to govern, make decisions, and make the tough decisions. And maybe we can wordsmith that later, but something to that effect. Governing is what you do. Others.
One thing I would just note that I see in here a few times that I think is important to add to is and I'm trying to find one of the examples, but basically the respecting the roles of the city manager and working through the city manager, in conversations with staff and staying in our lane, when we're supposed to.
Yeah. Elected to govern, make tough decisions, and kind of respecting the roles. I guess expecting the roles. And that's kind of a little link to what Heather said, because your role is, your role is to govern and make policy, and Rachel's role and and her staff is to implement. And so yeah, it's good. Anything else? Well, what do you guys conceptually agree with those 6 points? Is at least for the next year would be guiding principles, norms, expectations for this commissioner. As I said, it doesn't bind any other commission. It's just something that you can, to be honest, put on, like Bozeman does, or Missoula, or to be honest, like many, many, many other cities do, kind of put on the wall and remind each other and remind residents that these are kind of your guiding principles, at least for the next 12 months until you have a new election.
I think
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
go ahead, Commissioner.
No, the only thing that I think I would be interested in having included, and maybe it's in number 5, is we're elected to govern and thus serve the public, and I just want to make sure that service is at the heart of everything we're doing.
Heather, you have any question, any problem with that friendly amendment there?
no. I mean, I
Yeah,
think that's fine.
Yeah, I think the language makes a difference. I agree with Commissioner, Dean there.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, you are public servants. You are you are public servants, but you do more than your fair share.
They know. They also the community also knows that we have to make those decisions. So
you have to make decisions, but you are serving the community in that capacity. Right. So yeah. All right. Could we agree by consensus with these? And maybe, and we may need to revisit these at your next retreat. We'll wordsmith them, and you are meeting again, in this retreat section, but we could work on wordsmithing them a little bit. But conceptually, by consensus, do you agree?
I do.
How about this one? Block this. Doesn't want it to. Do you all agree by consensus?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you made a really good point in summary that you sent to us about Well, if you just look at other communities in Montana, there any degree of them diving into this sort of thing, where maybe they have an ethics handbook, maybe they have such things codified. But you said something, if the document is too dense, it'll be ignored. So I think this is a reasonable summary kind of the comments that have been made here. So thank you.
Well, I know this was a goal of Rachel's, that, and as I said, if they wouldn't exist in all these other communities, if there wasn't a need, you're not different. Other communities have done this. And then, as I said, I saw one that hadn't been updated since like 1974. Things have changed. So great. All right, Rachel, we will work on that. Thanks. Yeah, that was great. All right, Rachel, are you ready to take on the next part?
Did Commissioner I'm sorry.
Commissioner Holidays, are you there? Are you?
Yeah, I honestly, they look fine.
And O'Loughlin's there as well. Okay. We're all there. Okay, moving on.
Okay.
Okay. Can I take a 4 minutes while I'm trying to synchronize?
Yeah, maybe we want to take a 5-minute break while Rachel sets up? Coffee up?
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm all alone in like a 35-floor high rise. There's no person near me.
Sorry.
Not one person in downtown Denver today.
I'm all by myself too. Freezing. It's kind of cold in here. Thank you.
Want to see your bit. Okay. So we moved around the agenda a little bit, but we're on agenda item 2. Reframing administrative meetings to commission study sessions. And Rachel, you want to just kind of, I know that you have introduced this to all of the commissioners, but kind of for anybody else who's watching this conversation, want to frame it up?
You bet. You're ready. So after reading the report and listening to the feedback from all of you that Brenda shared over, and I think individually, I've talked with each of you about how we could be improving the information we get to you and trying to find the best way to study the issues before they get in front of you. But at the same time, I really appreciate the idea of ensuring that the community understands how much study has already gone into an item when it comes in front of the commission. So for final vote, the one thought was perhaps we could look at these administrative meetings in a method of study as opposed to identifying all items that only go in front of the commission. And I know not every item that comes into the admin meetings goes in front of the commission, but there's almost this balance of making sure you have enough information, all of you in a synchronized way, and yet keeping it within a method that allows the public to see it as well. So emails are really difficult. They're great because we, as staff, you can send us a question and we can answer the question and we send it to all of you and it's transparent to all of you. But that answer doesn't necessarily get out into the community. So I've been trying to think of other ways of these admin meetings being a study session. So Brenda had suggested I go and look at other communities and how they're running study sessions. I think that the most difficult part of this current state we're in is that we're in Zoom. And I understand in the past that the admin meetings did have a flavor of more study and a more relaxed setting. And I say relaxed setting because the intention of a study session is for you to feel comfortable, commissioners and mayor, asking any of our employees, any of the directors, the questions you need answers to on a particular item coming before you for discussion. And so I would just offer up this another community who does view them and just just to give you a feel for the relaxed nature that they're participating in. This is Norman, Oklahoma.
I have to let you in. That's probably why.
Looking good, Councilmember Carter.
See somebody in their car.
All right, there we go. There's Allison.
Okay, yeah, I see. Yeah, I'm letting you know.
We are live on YouTube. Let everyone know.
All right.
Okay, Mayor, we are live on YouTube now.
I see Councilmember Patron. I know that Councilmember Scott is on her way, so we will go ahead and be respectful of everyone's time, including our first guest on our first topic. For tonight's study session, again, we have 2 items. The first is a discussion regarding a phased approach to lifting the stay-at-home order currently in place. And then we will move on to discussion regarding the FYE 2021 City of Norman capital budget and the capital improvements financial plan for FYE 2022 through 2025. So for our first item, I've asked Dr. Gary Raskob with the OU Health Science Center to give us kind of some background on what we're dealing with, because we have said from the beginning that we will make.
So you can just get a feel for the environment. You know, this gal's putting on her makeup, another person's on his phone, someone's completely left the room.
I gotta interject there. If that crap happened here in Helena, Montana, you would get the newspaper all over you.
That's right.
As a matter of fact, do you know some of the emails I get? People tell me to tell Commissioner Halliday to cut his hair.
Oh, no.
Then you talking about putting makeup on? That would be
right. So I guess that's
your audience. Just say know your
here,
audience. Right? I know Helena. I know my audience. I will not be putting makeup on or doing that kind of stuff. That's not here, Helena.
So how about in your car, driving?
And driving?
You're right. It's not to criticize Norman or however they manage their community so much as to try and start with there are some places that are less formal perhaps than we are.
Very less formal.
And it works for them. And in Helena, we do have a more formal setting. But what I'm suggesting is that there's a balance here that maybe we could be talking through today. And that's what I'm hoping to suggest in a packet that was sent earlier to you all. The team sat down, the leadership team, we all sat down in Zoom and talked about what the meetings could be like for us to help you be prepared, as well for us to get the direction that we need to ensure that we're doing as you'd like. So sometimes there's a hesitancy from the team to ask direct questions of commission members in particular, whom they know would be concerned about it. And when we're meeting in the admin meetings, there's this balance around it's the majority vote of consensus, which we've termed consensus, which majority vote is great for decision making. Absolutely. When the study sessions or in the admin meetings studying an issue, I wonder often if we're moving too fast, to what you've already said, moving too fast and making sure that the decision, and I'll give a couple of examples, moving too fast before we're ready to make the decision. I think we had the revision to the ordinance most recently around response to the approved gun control measure. That probably could have spent more time in study. And so what I was suggesting is that even I think the book of fees, I keep bringing up the book of fees, but it's another good example of we moved too fast as a staff. Some of you were more comfortable than others. I was uncomfortable. I'm still new. Time, there's a balance of finding when is it the right time to move things out and when are things actually just not necessary for a big public commission meeting and really just direction specific. So what I'm hoping is that we can talk about the method that we use as staff to communicate to you that could improve an understanding of whether or not we believe we have to go to a full commission meeting, or if we just need direction from you in the agenda and admin meeting. And then last, making sure that you have on your list the things that you want to address for study as a matter of interest because of your constituents have elected you. Not all of you share the same interests. And some of you, we don't bring items before you until there are 3 who have agreed that it's important. So there are items that all of you have sent to me or we've talked about that have not come in front of an admin meeting because, or been studied by the team because there aren't 3 of you who said you're interested in it. And so the question I ask is for you today is that the process that you really want for the admin meetings? And I'm suggesting that there's another way to do it as well. If you have one item that is of interest, that all of you at least get the same information on that one item so that you can contemplate it later. You don't have to have it on an agenda. We don't have to talk about it, but at least we put it in some sort of an information only. I know we've talked about this before, some sort of information only memorandum. So we get the information out of email and into at least in Danae's records in the city clerk's office in some way, and then you all have access to the same information. So I'm going to share my screen again to the to begin with just the admin meeting drafted revised agenda. You all see my screen? Is it in a full screen now? Brenda?
Yes.
So, Rachel, this is what your team is proposing to modify your current admin meetings, correct?
Correct. So
Okay.
the agenda itself looks similar to what you already see, but in talking with the team, we were trying to get at what we think would be helpful for these admin meetings and their intention. So making more.
Just go through this agenda very quickly. If some of you had not had, have all of you had a chance to look through this? Some of you have, maybe some of you haven't. Rachel, just briefly spend, a minute just going through what you're proposing this meeting looks like.
Yeah. So the intention, what we're suggesting is that these are our work sessions where we study the issues with an informal feel. Now, I won't be putting on my makeup and I won't be driving my car, but at least the staff have an idea of this is where the spirited discussion happens, and the items brought before the commission and by staff are at least in alignment with the strategic outcomes. So we won't spend time and your time on things that don't align with where you want the community to be going, and then based on how your electorate have voted you into office, but really to allow for broad discussion on items that really we believe support those as they come up. The same if another commissioner has those requests around a particular item. So this is where we really receive direction from you. The commission receives input from other committees and boards. So instead of going to the commission meetings themselves, we pull the boards and commissions and boards and committees into these admin meetings. We already started to do that really with the HCC. The same would apply here. When one member of the commission has a question, instead of an email, we, the staff, prepare an information-only staff report for you so that you have the same information. You can choose to elevate it or not, but at least you all have the same information. These are reports, they're not presentations. Those information onlys are not intended to be large presentations. They're just information only on areas of interest to make sure that all members have the same information. It's also the opportunity to prepare for questions on policy issues. So in the big conversation we have in these admin meetings where we're having those spirited discussions, if this discussion becomes one of needing more study, the team can go back and do more work. It's not a failure for not completing and providing sufficient information. The team can go back, spend more time, and the pace isn't as important as, unless it's life safety. So trying to think about whether or not something needs to move fast or move slower just because of the broad policy implication. Do we need to go back and study an item more because there's definitely greater information needed? And I think that really happened in the gun item. We needed to go back. We were in a commission second vote meeting, and a meeting of on second voting on the implementation of the revision to ordinance, and we had to come back and answer more questions. That itself is just an indication that we took it out of an admin meeting too early, to me, in my opinion. These meetings are also an opportunity to prepare for that public policy discussion. So the team needs to get used to the practice of identifying when you've already talked about this item, so you don't have to itemize when you've done it. We need to be preparing our information better for you, and so that we can document. This was the last time you talked about it. Here's the link to the document itself. Here's the research. All of that information comes up at this meeting, these admin meetings. So with that in mind, I would just open it up to your thoughts around these intentions.
So this wasn't, Rachel, right, this came, yeah, Mayor, this just to remind, this came up for, to be honest, for several of you who either think you need more information, or some who are concerned that commissioners weren't getting enough information prior to commission meetings where you need to make those decisions. And so that's where Rachel and her team thought, you know what, giving you the most information you can so you can make decisions at your council meetings efficiently and effectively. So yeah, sorry, Mayor.
No, I was just going off, but I think you partly answered it because but part of that is on us, because if we feel that we don't have enough information, we should be proactive enough to be able to solicit that kind of information from you, or at least let you know. But when we go to the meeting and try to solicit the information from you, you know, so what I'm saying here is that then let's be proactive enough to, before coming to the meeting, try to get some of those issues resolved. Because when we get to the meeting, and then when we get to the second meeting, we're still thinking on questions to ask. It seems like we're not ready to vote. But if we were proactive enough where we started asking those questions and doing our research with you, I think the pace is okay if we were to do that.
So Mayor, what do you think about Rachel's suggestions to change these admin meetings to study meetings?
What do you mean? Just changing the words?
No, I'm changing the words. I think it is changing the atmosphere a bit, Rachel, right? Of the meeting?
Yeah, so that you feel as though, well, really the directors and the team feel as though this is an opportunity for us to gel as a unit with you, as opposed to apart from you.
Yeah, but that's what I said. So maybe that the meeting could be that part where we bring up those things we don't understand. We bring up those things that we need research on and clarification on. So yeah, I don't have a problem with that, because I think it will be helpful, and then we'll be able to move forward. So.
Emily?
So.
Oh, Commissioner Howard, then we'll get to you.
Yeah, I'll weigh in, because I've been through about you know, I don't know, I'd say 4 iterations of admin meeting agendas at this point. And, you know, I appreciate what Manager Harlow-Shaw is trying to do here, but I will concur with the mayor that to the extent we're that staff or the manager are feeling they're not getting the direction or the feedback, that's been the fault of the commission. At the end of the day, we can build the best possible structure. But if we suck at doing our job to provide that consensus and that direction, it ain't going to matter how beautiful the structure and the process are. You need to come with questions. I'll give an example. We'll all have our own examples and we'll all have disagreements on them. The housing trust, right? That was brought up in late June or early July with a full-on structured proposed ordinance, just for solely discussion at a later date so that people could have time to read and think about and ask and do. And when we got to the second meeting, there were questions and there were issues and people said they didn't have enough time and staff was asked to answer some questions. And by the time we got to the third meeting, there was, still people asking sort of the same questions. And, the issue of staff provided us some info. We sent them back for more, but also it was incumbent upon us, right, to go out and look at that stuff and do some of that work ourselves. And by the time we went through it, there was really no concerns or changes or work done on it on our last admin meeting. And we got to the final commission meeting and the objection was still raised that we hadn't spent enough time and hadn't answered all the questions. Right. So you can't fix that, staff, right? Like, I appreciate Ms. Harleshoff bringing it up, but if we're going to play the process game on some of those or be underprepared on our parts on some of them, that's just how it's going to work. So I'm in agreement with doing this. But we have, this is a place where really we have to be feeling comfortable to come to these meetings and willing to ask each other questions. That's a dynamic that Zoom isn't always that friendly on, but it's also a dynamic that Helena has always struggled with. 7 years ago, we'd still have admin meetings where the commissioners, just sort of talk, ask some questions to staff, and then, sort of make statements. I think a free-flowing discussion is much more healthy on these, but saying that has not always resulted in people actually doing it, right? Ask a bunch of questions, ultimately say I do or don't agree with this. Not necessarily. So, if we think this structure is going to help, but at the end of the day, it's on the five of us and also the manager, to help actually reach that goal. I don't know if we're talking about the whole first paragraph. There's one other thing I would like to throw out there, and it's for specifically discussion. And I'll give my thought on it, is that the last line says last set agenda with time limits, meetings end at 6 p.m. I think it's a good aspirational goal to set those time limits. Commissioners in the past have had children, familial obligations, need to be able to set schedules for their lives. But I will say this, and it's something I have said multiple times in the past when criticized, right, for having too many items on an agenda. I believe we work until we're done. That is our job as the commission. And if we want those robust and substantive debates, if you want us to pull an agenda item that we all came in not knowing we were going to have thoughts and questions on, and all of a sudden the free-flowing discussion has led to us going, holy cow, we need to discuss this more and look at all these interesting nuances we're teasing out, then you got to go past 6 p.m. sometimes, because you cannot. This used to happen all the time previously. The former mayor used to just shut down meetings at 6, which meant you either needed to truncate every discussion to 15 minutes, which is exactly what we're trying to avoid, or 20 minutes, or everything needed to get shoveled onto a future agenda and things would get gummed up. You bump things from future agendas. So I appreciate the aspirational goal of 6 p.m. And I know that there are going to be people, the mayor's probably muttering under his breath at me right now, but I am a full-on believer that this commission keeps its butt in the seats to finish these jobs. And will that mean all of us can stay always? Absolutely not. And I get there are times that I'd have to leave, but that's our job. I mean, I know Commissioner Logan agrees with me on that because he used to sometimes complain about some of the, goofy or dumb things that I might bring to the commission, that it was that it was using up staff's time, right? And my response every time, this commission stays until it's done. And I have appreciated when, I haven't appreciated it always when we go to 7:30 at night on a meeting slated to end at 6 o'clock, but that's our job, people. And so I am sensitive to the staff's time. I am sensitive to the manager's time because I know she's up at like 5 a.m., if not earlier, she's probably saying. but that's our job. And so I hope that we will strongly consider, and sometimes you just can't figure out what's going to be a topic. You put 4 on the agenda and it turns out 2 of them take an hour and a half. But I hope we keep cognizant that that's an important thing for us to do our work. This isn't a job of convenience for us all. It's a obligation. And if we're prepared and we're actually aspiring to legitimate, robust conversations like we say we're gonna in these, arbitrary deadlines can't drive the substantive discussion.
And under that same breath, Commissioner Halliday, I will also caution us to know that we do have the city staff that are on these calls, and I heard you talking about this is our job, and I agree with you. It's our job, but we also have to be cognizant of the fact that we also have city staff on here too, and I don't know how they're being paid for all this extra time or so. Or are they doing flex hours and all that kind of stuff? So we have to be mindful.
I might just add, I think building off the mayor's point, I think that what this highlights for me at least is the balance between what Commissioner Halliday is noting, but also what Manager Harlow-Shaw opened this with, which is pace. And I think that, we also need to be cognizant of community members, because there are a handful who come to every single meeting, but I think it's we can be more open to community involvement when we make it accessible for people. One thing that I had in here, and this is something I've just thought about before I was on the commission too, but with admin meetings, I think this comes back to, opportunities for the community to be more engaged or listening, paying attention, is if there is, opportunity to move these to 5 o'clock, because most people average people are working, at 4. And I think that we limit the ability for people to attend when they are at 4. And I think also one thing, if we're just thinking long-term and institutionally, we want to be attracting people to join the commission that have varied perspectives and backgrounds and experiences. And I think that we limit who can have the ability to run for a part-time position. For example, if I was still teaching, there's no way that I could have run for the commission. And so I think that, thinking about how we build long-term stability within this commission as a structure, should be something that we're thinking about as well.
Thank you. Who else wants to weigh in here?
I just, one question. We have in the past had actual work sessions on specific items. Is that still, I guess to the city manager, something that you envision? I mean, I'd actually like to have maybe a substantive conversation, and maybe it's not today, but like having some substance at some point about what are the big ticket items that we as a body would like to do these kind of work sessions for, right? We've had like at least a couple meetings where there's been reference to, well, we've had more than a couple meetings referencing sidewalks, but like a concept of like, should we have a sidewalk district? What is the commission's role on expanding, housing just generally, but also supporting affordable housing? I think it would be worth, is there, 5 to 10 items where we actually feel like, yes, this is a structure that we think would lend itself to having a more informal conversation about, a particular topic. I mean, we used to do that. We were doing a ton of work sessions a couple years ago that I think we just recognized fitting everything on a formal admin meeting just was making it really difficult to be able to have a free-flowing discussion about items. So I don't know, City Manager, if that's something you would also envision, or are we trying to kind of squeeze everything into the every other week Wednesday meeting?
That's thank you. That's a really great question. And it feels like there's two, and listening to Commissioner Dean, there's almost two frames of thought in my mind as I listen to both of you. The first is this more dialogue with the community about how and what you're doing, just a general session like, hey, you want to come over and have coffee with us and ask us questions? It's not in a full formal meeting. That almost feels like an opportunity that I'm hearing might be available or on the table. But then Heather, yeah, the larger spirited, more in-depth conversation, my hope is that when we get into these strategic outcomes and the particular focus areas, that those are the ones that we're pulling out. Right now, we as a team cannot figure out which items need more study with you and which do not, because there are so many issues and so many varied topics that we are not sure which ones to spend the greatest amount of time with you on. And it becomes difficult when we get into the meetings, the agenda meetings, admin meetings, and then on to the commission meetings when we haven't given you enough time for the conversation. Yes, absolutely, they're on the table. And I think I would empower all of you if I could to tell me, I need a working session. We need a working session. And then perhaps there's, the two of you, a consensus. I'm not sure what that method is, but perhaps it's a consensus or it is a majority vote that we move to working sessions on a particular topic. I think the gun item might have been one that could have been an item that needed work session. The same with that book of fees. Those are all things that, yeah, I agree. So I would just say that I won't know, to your point earlier, Commissioner Halliday, I won't always know when you need more, and certainly the team. I need to learn more about you all too. I'll get better at figuring out when you need more study, but.
You see, Rachel, it's not you to figure out. It's us. We need to tell you what we need.
Yes, agreed.
It's not you to be figuring these things out. We need to just come out and say, hey, I need A, B, C, D. Let's look at A, B, C, D. You'll never figure me out.
There are going to be times when we reach one of these meetings where no one has asked a question before the meeting. And all of a sudden in the midst of a meeting, we realize, oh my goodness, there's other stuff that we need more information on. It's incumbent upon us at that meeting, right, as a group to say, here are areas we need more information on. It is totally inappropriate for the commission to just say, we need more information on this, or we need more time to think about this. These meetings should be always driving forward, right, not treading water. And so, you can't be prepared for every possible contingency at these meetings. But that goes back to these norms that we put beforehand, right? Be decisive, make a decision, be prepared. And if you're not prepared to make a decision that day, articulate the basis for why not, articulate the further needs, right? Not ambiguous questions of, I just want more information, not ambiguous questions of merely, should we have 17 more listening sessions or 2 more or no more? But true, right? That's what we owe to the public, is to not waste their time, so that we don't have to tell the individuals who have taken off work for a very important topic or have stuck with us until 7:30 at night when they thought it was going to happen at 5:45, that, oh, we're just going to kick this down the road again because we're not totally prepared. Are there going to be times that we need more information? Absolutely. This is all, we've done this before. We've been here before. I appreciate trying to create the structure for it, but it's incumbent upon us, and some of them are just going to be case-by-case circumstances that we realize that something is a bigger topic. And maybe, the manager will just say to us as we're spiraling into the, second hour on the same topic, perhaps we should break out, and perhaps we should do an extra Wednesday meeting on just this topic. These are just things that end up getting played by ear in many circumstances, and it's what we've done in the past. We did it with police discussions and SROs. We have done it in the past with sign ordinance when that was an issue. We've done it in the past with certain annexation questions. There's tons of prior precedent for doing these things, and precedent for all commissioners to ask beforehand for what the city already has, what they don't know, to bring in their own prior research. And I hadn't thought about it, but Commissioner O'Loughlin's flagging of the sidewalk discussion is apropos. We've had, I think it was 3 or 4 sessions where we brought up sidewalks, where we kicked it back to Mr. Konopke to go do something. And that's about the worst thing we can possibly do for staff, go do something without structure, and to continually do that at each session. That's inefficient for government functioning. That's no direction to him and the manager. And it really wastes the time of anybody who's tracking it. So again, I'm not sure that this can be the panacea for it. I go back, the mayor framed it, right? We all have a responsibility, and we really control how much time we're going to sort of tread water on a lot of these issues and identify the work that needs to be done through our own efforts on the backside, and then to provide staff with that clarity when we need more.
So I would say, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I would push back a little bit on it's all up to us, right? Like, I actually think, Rachel, that you probably have a pretty good sense of the top, 4 or 5 items that have come up that you guys aren't getting enough direction from us that probably warrant a longer work session, right? Like, I just want to push back a little bit on, like, staff can't figure out. I mean, I'm not sure that's true. And I would also say, in the past, staff has said, I think it would be good to do a work session at this moment to discuss Cruz Avenue and possible designs and what are next steps, right? I mean, those are things that I think you all can suss out, especially since you are having one-on-one meetings with each of us, right? Like, if you're starting to feel like 1 or 2 commissioners is hung up on a particular item or has additional questions, like, I think this probably rises to a level where we need to have a deeper conversation about it. I think that is within your purview also to suggest or recommend. So yes, it is up to us to do the homework and come with being prepared to make decisions, but also I would hate for the takeaway of this to say staff has to have direction on every single time we have a work session.
Yeah, I made that edit here, Heather, and and I think I added the SRO that wasn't on the table for a working session. So you're absolutely right.
Can I ask?
Well, and we should make a distinction between those. Those are work groups, right? That is not the body having a work session, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that is a different. And yes, I agree with you. And I think, Rachel, what I've really appreciated is that you've kind of set out a timeline and topics for the next few months. Like, that isn't something we have previously gotten from a city manager, of like, here's how I'm mapping out. And I'm not suggesting that city managers didn't do that or staff didn't do that, but like that is helpful for us to kind of get a sense of, in February, I've got these items on the docket. So I don't want to suggest that you all aren't doing that. I think that you guys are doing that.
I'm glad that you're making the distinction between the working groups. That's what I needed to get through, because the working groups are another layer that are, I know we're going to be talking about boards and commissions or boards and committees on a future agenda item with you all. But there's another nuance with the working groups that I really appreciate that you all are open to, that they have a beginning and an end, as opposed to being a commission created board that lives for a very defined period of time. And those also become a tool for you all, so that not only do we have the working sessions and the working groups, but you also have the boards and commissions as well. And knowing when to punt the issue to those advisory groups, I think, is the other layer that we've been trying to distinguish. Like, maybe we're not the right ones to study it, because you want more study by those you've put onto an advisory board as well. So I'm also, so maybe we should, I'll just add a note here, know when it's appropriate for, if you're open to it, and punting to an advisory committee.
One question I have, I think for Rachel, I'm curious. I mean, I know obviously staff has probably seen this proposed format, and I'm just interested, you know, what their take on it is, because I think, as you mentioned in the opening, these are really an opportunity to have, you know, a two-way conversation, and not just receiving information, but a mutual exchange of ideas and information, and, you know, decision making, or getting to somewhere where you are making a decision. And so I'm curious, you know, is this format something that would give staff, you know, what they need in terms of that relationship and conversation?
I think Zoom is the ultimate hurdle to real good dialogue, because you can't read body language, frankly. And so I think that team, absolutely, they were the ones who put, I would say that I often facilitate the conversation from the leadership team to be specific on things that would help them. So I would tell you that this, all the areas in blue are from them.
Okay. I mean, then I'm very comfortable and actually excited for this, to try this type of format. So I would be in favor of this.
Commissioner Logan, I think you're the one we haven't heard from yet. Are you?
Yeah, I'm sure supportive of this. I think staff and the manager have spent a good deal of time on concerns that they have with admin meetings, and I think the edits that the manager has made sort of as we go along, you know, take care of concerns that were expressed by the mayor and commissioners. And I think Commissioner O'Loughlin makes a good point in terms of, you know, sort of this one-on-one dialogue that we have usually weekly with the manager, and that should be helpful for her to gauge where each of us are at. So yeah, I'm certainly in favor of giving it a try.
Right, and I appreciate, you know, Commissioner Halliday just referencing kind of what you'd already accomplished, because it is, you know, people expect you guys to get the job done. That's why they elected you to govern, and that's why you've got those principles. But these are things that I keep framed it very well. You have different styles. Some of you are going to be very direct. You know, you're different people. You have different styles and how you approach things. And I think you know that. But it you know, because someone is very direct and someone isn't, you know, doesn't mean that you don't want the information. But I think that Commissioner Halliday just referenced the importance of you, you know, asking questions, having a good free flowing dialogue, and getting to that point where you can trust one another, where you can kind of push back, you know, in a nice way. Just saying, I'm not sure what you're saying. I'm, you know, not sure what you're saying. I'm just say it. Can you say it a different way? Because I'm not getting it. You know, you're kind of going to have to reach that point, but you have some free flowing dialogue. You can kind of do that and ask each other questions so that your meetings and your governing are just more efficient. Any other thoughts on giving this a try? I know, you know, Commissioner Halliday, he's been around, so he's got institutional memory on how all these different approaches and how they've been tried, and that's how it comes when you're the longest serving member. You have a really good institutional memory, and you know, to be honest, it's great if you can do that and you can remind you, because it's important. And there's some institutional memory on the commission of what's worked and what hasn't, and what's been tried. So are you also, and just also just, you are operating by consensus. And I know that initially when I talked to some of you, it said you were, you were in your current meetings, you were operating by consensus, but you thought using that term, but still taking a vote. But you notice that we're not voting today. We are operating by consensus. So any other kind of thoughts on this proposal? Amendments?
One thing
changes?
that I just wanted to note, and this, we're not going to solve this in this structure or format, which is fine, but I just want to flag it again moving forward is I was on a call this week with other young elected officials around the country, and it was a conversation about how you know, why there are so few young elected officials in a lot of local government or municipal government. And a lot of it does come back to, you know, the structures and availability. And I think that we do miss out on perspectives and backgrounds when, you know, we don't move structures in a way that, you know, you can only be in management, or you can only, you know, you have to have a very flexible job to do this. Which is, you know, I'm fortunate that I have that, but I think that we do miss out on other perspectives if we're not thinking about, you know, how to make this a more stable institution. And I think that goes to the point you made about institutional knowledge. You know, you build institutional knowledge when people of various backgrounds have the ability to participate, you know, and maybe step into leadership. And so that's one thing that I just want to, you know, keep in this conversation as we are moving forward, is how do we make the commission a body that is available for lots of different backgrounds and perspectives to be part of, and not just someone who, you know, works at a management level or, you know, can work from home. Or, I mean, it's something that I really think that just for the long-term stability and success of our commission, even when all of us are gone, you know, that we can have structures that build that institutional knowledge while also bringing in diverse perspectives and backgrounds that we don't, this commission, you know, in my lifetime rarely has. I mean, there's always a couple, but, you know, I can only think of, you know, a few of us over the last 20 years. So just something to think about.
Brenda,
Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Commissioner. Sorry.
thank you. I don't not particularly want to spend a lot of time on it, but I would be interested in what the rest of the commission thinks, and the manager generally, about the idea of, say, moving to 5, an admin meeting.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask Commissioner Dean if she had specific, I mean, I don't disagree with anything that you just said. And I think that it is definitely a reality. I mean, you look at like Hometown Helena as sort of like the, you know, the standard bearer of like, well, you got to go to Hometown Helena. It was like, I mean, I have a young child, and I can't make a meeting at 6:45 in the morning, right? But there is sort of like this expectation in this community that I'm supposed to be at those meetings. So I think it is something that we as a body could think about specific changes, and then perhaps also how we communicate out to the public about what we are or not doing. So I guess the question to you, like, what are there specific things that you think that we should do to be responsive to that comment?
Yeah, I mean, I do think, you know,
Can we possibly just punting this conversation to the next thing on the agenda about public engagement, about reaching the public, unless it's specific to this item of the study sessions. But I think Emily's, some of you have just raised the idea that is relevant of changing the time to 5. Is it at 4 now? Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm comfortable with punting it. I will say that, like, Commissioner Dean, I'm glad you brought it up. It's been a discussion point. I've talked with multiple people over the years who simply won't run for this, right? Because the times cannot work for their family. They don't have a partner. They don't have a partner, or they don't have a partner capable of doing these things. I think it's a great discussion to have if we put a pin in it, set a discussion, and bring those ideas to it. I will say it's like, it's one of those, and I'm glad Commissioner Laughlin brought it up. It's one of those instances where, and I would encourage all of us, including myself, to not just say we should focus on this in the future, but to really say, if this is an important enough discussion, let's get it on an admin meeting. Let's see if 3 people want to talk about it, and let's go to that admin meeting to talk about it, so that, you know, we have the concrete discussion at a future date, and we don't just, because I aspire to the same thing. You know, for a long time there, the commission was vastly underrepresented with anyone under the age of 40, right? And that got flipped a few years ago, which I think was fantastic for Helena's future. But that just happened organically to a great extent. And if we can think of structural ways that we ensure diversity, fantastic. But like, let's not just say we want to, because I want to, but I'm totally down with that if we want to put that on an agenda to truly discuss structural changes and really kick them around. 5 o'clock, I used to have single parents who said I could only do it at the noon hour, right? So we need to have a legitimate discussion of what all these times mean when we're going to do it, and have a really thoughtful conversation about what access means. We moved today to Saturday, right? That works a problem on some people. We did an all day or a 12 to 5 rate sitting on a Sunday once and got pilloried for interfering with religious exercise. So we, like, if we really want to have this discussion, like, let's put it on an agenda, let's kick it around there, let's bring those ideas. I mean, absolutely, but let's not leave it hanging on because I think we all agree diversity is good and more people's good. So yeah, I agree with Brenda if we put a pin in it and move forward. But we really do get to the nitty gritty if we're going to talk about it.
And that is something that again, you agree on, and maybe, yeah, you can spend some time thinking about, Emily, you've got access to some, you know, to some what people are doing nationally. Obviously, Helena is not alone in this conundrum. Like, some city councils meet at 1 in the afternoon. Like, who's available then? You know, if you have a job, 1 o'clock. Crazy, right? Yeah, it's we're going to talk a little parts of this in this public engagement conversation. We'll take a little part, not all of it, not to the full extent that I think that this conversation is worthy of. It's a big one. And it's a big one. And I wrote it down. I think Rachel wrote it down, that it is probably something you guys need to figure out and what you need to do differently. And maybe you can, you know, really change some, you know, do some creative things. Because there are some creative things that are happening. But are you back to kind of this? Are you okay with giving this a try? Do we have consensus on this? Nothing.
I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm good.
I mean, I think everyone has said so, but great. Okay, Rachel?
Okay. Yes,
I
I just want to go through the items that I added in here really quickly, and then we'll keep moving if there's any concerns. Really, the city manager's report is for breaking news. Really, the quick summaries that I provide, I'm trying to distinguish between the 2 meetings and the purpose of my section in particular, and making sure that you get what you want out of my role on that city manager's report. As time progresses, I'm also going to be with the strategic plan, wanting to implement with the team some performance measures and a different kind of communication tool for you all, so that the team can show movement toward your performance or towards your strategic outcomes, and working on some metrics. So my hope is that the city manager's report becomes an opportunity for me to communicate to you the movement in a summary format on a routine basis of your strategic outcomes and particular focus areas, so that you're aware that we're continuing to maintain that focus. Because as we go along, there will be always things that come up that the team, just because of our operational needs, must bring forward that don't necessarily align within those strategic outcomes. So I want to make sure that, you know, that's my intention, is this longer term goal of becoming more succinct with you all on our work and how it's feeding your priorities. So for now, That would be within the commission's formal meetings so that the community has an opportunity to hear that as well. But this city manager's report, I've sort of just tried to narrow in on. These are just only like breaking news, really high level. This you have to know right now, but otherwise I'm not going to have large items on the city manager's report in admin meetings. This is really your opportunity, if it's a study session, to work through items, study issues, and work with the team. So just want to make sure that you understand what I'm envisioning my spot and space on this agenda is. You're okay with that? Also, there's not been an opportunity, cleared opportunity within the agenda, and it's because I'm new. I'm sure perhaps it has been this way in the past, so forgive me if I'm saying something that was already available, but I hadn't seen an opportunity for the judge to provide an update or the city clerk to provide an update. We have one for the city attorney. All of these 3 opportunities will be made available within this topic area 4, but this ensures the judge and the clerk have an opportunity to talk to you about things they need to bring forward to you. For example, Danae will be working on M-files and records management. This is a great place for her to tell all of you about that. The judge, I know we're going to bring her forward and provide you an update on what it was like to move and the big picture of it all for you as well. So making sure they have an area on here. Just adding in this items needing direction only, so that this distinction between when we need direction and when we need to just give you information. Trying to make sure that you see and we list out those areas where we are providing you with an information only update, similar to like the consent agenda where there's really not a presentation, but you at least get a memo. And we've told you on this agenda what that memo will be. And then you all could choose to turn it into something that needs direction later. But for now, it is that summary item that either we feel like you need to know about, or one of you has asked us information on in an email, and not all of you are privy to that. So we want to make sure you have it. In the needing direction area, those just to be very specific with the team to help them figure out, do you actually just need to just give them an information only presentation, or do you need direction? If you need direction, then what is the direction that you need? And that opportunity is here under item 5. And then last 7, this came up as something that and all of these elements were really a conversation with the leadership team, with the directors, around areas from the community. So we had not only the Helena Citizens Council wanted to be a part of the conversation, but also there's been others who have wanted to be part of the agenda just to bring updates. Is it appropriate for those presentations in the commission meetings, or are they better in the study meetings? That's actually a question for you. Knowing that in the Helena Citizens Council, the same idea where we study the issue and then you all decide to make it a policy issue at a commission meeting. Same idea here with the community. Do we have those presentations on like we did with Good Samaritan? Is that here, or is it at the commission meeting? So really that's a question to you all that I would really love your feedback on for item 7.
Well, just to follow up on a question, my understanding is the Good Samaritan conversation was spurred by Commissioner Dean, or was it Good Samaritan bringing it to you, Rachel, as the city manager?
Right, that did come from, that was part of a larger, you're right, the larger homelessness conversation. And there were 3 parts from Commissioner Dean, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I guess I would just say, I mean, we should be really clear about how things are, like, who's providing direction for adding things to the agenda. I mean, I really appreciated that conversation and Commissioner Dean bringing it forward. I think that makes a lot of sense. There wasn't like a decision that needed to be made. It was like an update from the community. I think, honestly, Rachel, you have the authority to put things on the agenda. And so if you're hearing from individual commissioners and you think that it makes sense to have a community partner provide an update, that's within your prerogative to do. I get a little nervous about leaving this sort of open-ended, that anybody can reach out directly to you and you haven't gotten any sort of sense from the commission that it's of value to include. I mean, it just seems like it could get unwieldy, perhaps. So, I mean, I think that the structure that we have right now works. And again, like, you as city manager have the ability to put things on the agenda.
Anybody have any other thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it would be more helpful to know for me the sort of the issues, you know, based on what Commissioner O'Loughlin is saying. Probably, I mean, from the manager for sure, but also from the commissioners with regard to, you know, getting things on the agenda. Obviously, I'm used to sort of, again, 7 years worth of practice with how things have found their way on. But it, you know, it would be, if there is a specific issue where there's a problem, question surrounding it, then, you know, identifying that issue and attempting to resolve that directly would be probably the best way to make it clear if there are things to be discussed, I guess.
I think one thing I know that has just, especially starting, it wasn't always clear to me, of like, do we have a process? If you have, you know, if there's a particular issue or idea, you know, that someone's provided to you, or you have, you know, what is the process to move forward and you know, get it on the agenda? And I think Commissioner Halliday is very good at doing this, and I think that, you know, I now understand, you know, how he presents ideas, and, you know, what might be an effective way for other commissioners to do that. And I'm wondering if maybe this could be an opportunity, you know, to start bringing up those sort of topics, even if it, you know, requires action or not, but an opportunity to say, you know, we need to start thinking about this idea or you know, this particular issue, because we really, I mean, I've never been given any exact procedure as to this is how you bring forward an idea or a topic that you think needs to be discussed.
What if
we do have that as an agenda item. I think we should be able to utilize that at that time to be able to put that forward, because it's on our agenda, you know, items for the next meeting. We could use that to start bringing those ideas forward, I think.
Well, and I'll tell you, Mr. Mayor, I mean, historically, every commission I've been on, I guess we've never enshrined it because I didn't, you know, it had never needed to be enshrined, but irrespective whether it was with Commissioners Elsasser, Mayor Smith, Ellison, Ferris Olson, Wicks, Noonan, right? Like, it's always just been a thing that you just, commission comments right off the top. I remember when we did the sewer repair line, right? Commissioner Ferris Olson came in one day and said, hey, I have this thing I want to discuss. It's this idea, right? I've got a general framework for it. You know, are you guys interested in talking about this? And the commission, at least a majority, said, yeah, we'd like to move forward with that idea. That's how, you know, I presented it to you all with the initial swipe at the housing trust. Commissioner Ellison, I remember back in the day, asked a question about how the advisory transportation committee was structured, and the commission agreed to, you know, sort of hear more information from staff there. And again, what happened in most of those was an initial proposal, right, of talk about it at a future meeting type situation, and enough commissioners said, yeah, let's do that in response to that. either place it on an administrative agenda, or there were times where it was agreed that it would go on a commission meeting agenda. So if we need to like spell that out in clear print in some way, but that's how it has always generally worked. If we want to switch to the situation where like I can call up Manager Harlow Schalk and tell her I got some ideas that I've been thinking about. I hadn't talked about it with any of the other commissioners, and those all wind up there for either substantive discussion or presentation. I'm going to say that's fine only in sort of a facetious or sarcastic manner. That would be bananas in terms of I got a lot of ideas, and I know y'all do too. And so it would be completely unwieldy and chaotic to do things that way. So historically, we've always relied on that type of situation. And sometimes it was respectful deference. And sometimes it was express support of the concept. So, I mean, if we need to spell that out, absolutely. I guess I had always sort of understood that to be the clear implication. And it's a practice that we have used this year as well.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful because I know, I mean, just from my own, like we don't necessarily have a robust onboarding for new commissioners. And I think, not just for commissioners, but also the public, knowing, you have an idea, you want to talk to a commissioner about it, and see if they can help bring it to the body as a whole. I do think having this spelled out would be helpful, for that institutional knowledge going forward too.
But I also want to be clear, like we're not hamstringing ourselves. We've had situations historically where a commissioner comes to a Monday night meeting and says, during their commissioner comments, I want to talk about these things, and we've had the discussion and we've consensus moved forward on that. I mean, we ultimately are an elected body that can make these determinations and direction through a majority of commissioners directing this. And I want to be clear that there's a certain amount of over-engineering that then leads and devolves into process objections and sort of non-substantive cat fights amongst all of us that is pointless when it's really a discussion of are we going to ultimately move forward on these things? So I think sketching out, but it's always like we exist in a majority world. Rule of three, right? At the end of the day, is what will ultimately get things on an agenda or get talked about further. I think is that base principle that's always been followed at the city of Helena in my experience.
I mean, you have a consent agenda, and one thing I think that Emily, and you work up at the legislature, and and Heather, we all know this, is that some ideas aren't ready for policy prime time, and so that's always kind of that thing that all lawmakers kind of have to think about is, I've had some really good ideas, and the timing's been terrible for them, because the timing just isn't right for whatever reason. The commission, legislative, not the right, just not ready, or the public's not ready. So if that's something to think about too, but it does seem like everybody is open and you've agreed on a norm that you want to have these free-flowing, robust policy discussions. I think you all, and this is said very kindly, are policy nerds. You enjoy it. This is why you ran, because you enjoy the policy, you enjoy the robust discussion. And there may be some times when, your peers are like, it's not ready for prime time, but maybe next month, next year it is, but, or we just got too much on our schedule, but thanks for bringing it up. But I think you want that. And I think if you all desire and this kind of free-flowing conversation of ideas, you can make it happen. You have to have some self-discipline. Just take self-discipline. And that's to remind your constituents as well. I mean, their ideas may not be ready for prime time either. So with these changes, are you in agreement to give this a try?
I am.
Yes.
Great.
Can I just add one more item?
Yeah.
And then we'll maybe take a break and then move to the next piece on the agenda if you all are ready. On the Commissioner On the committee discussions, there was a note from the staff that the commissioners used to actually provide, years ago, apparently used to provide the committee discussion updates here as opposed to the commissions or the committees themselves. So just a thought on a process. I don't know if that was something that you all wanted to go back to doing, but wanted to make sure you knew that that was something apparently that had happened in the past.
Would you repeat that, Rachel?
Sure. Sure. On item 8, in the past, the commissioners used to provide the committee discussions and updates as opposed to the commissions themselves, the committees themselves. So instead of having the board chair come in for an advisory board to provide an update, the commissioner who was responsible as the designated liaison from the commission to the board was the one who provided an update instead. Just wanted to let you know that that is an opportunity if you wanted to go back to that, where just to help sync up some of that information that you're getting really from all the boards.
So if I can just jump in, because we actually hadn't really done that much, I think, even in the last 3 years. That was a holdover from the even earlier commissions. There's pluses and minuses on all of this, right? In the past, sometimes we'd get to that part of the agenda and no commissioner would say anything, right? You'd missed last month's meeting for whatever conflict reason. So now 3 committees that had met that month did not get an update in many cases, or a commissioner was absent, and so they didn't get an update on that situation. And for some people that was great. That meant they didn't have to listen to a background of the committee stuff, and they were thrilled to move that through that part of the meeting. Other times it then fell on the commissioner's individual, and we all had agendas at those meetings that they found interesting or didn't find interesting to highlight. It certainly moved faster, I will say that, from a internal staff perspective. So we definitely got out of there by 6 o'clock on more occasions. From the standpoint of the new way of doing it, it's a little bit more unwieldy. It allows the committees to drive the agendas as opposed to the commission itself, which that's a philosophical belief of whether or not the commission relies on these committees to assist the commission, or if it relies on the committees to tell the commission what should be happening, right? Those are different ideas of what these committees are for. Certainly, for example, there are times when commissioners bring up ideas from those committees that go nowhere. It's a lot harder for us, I think we've seen, when a committee leader comes and actually says, here are the 3 things we're looking at, and we'd like the 5 of you to actually make a decision regarding these things. It's a heck of a lot more responsive to our constituents, whether we like it or not, because it's harder to look them in the face and say, we really value your opinion. Thanks for your presentation, go away now. So there's definitely been more of a push. I mean, Non-Motorized has been asking us to do stuff for a year that we've just sat on our hands of, but it's gotten a lot tougher to ignore when Mr. Riemann comes in and says, hey guys, we need this. Same thing with Citizen Conservation Board, and they get buried a lot more. So, I'm open to it either way. I definitely think we've gotten more robust presentations from the boards actually presenting, but it's also proven to be more unwieldy in terms of time because we give everyone 10 to 15 minutes, and that eats up a significant portion of the meeting. So a little too much background for some of y'all, but understanding how we really weren't getting anything from them previously when we had it in the structure that is under number 8.
I have a quick question. I'd just be curious to get the list of the ones that we are getting updates from and how frequently. One possible way to sort of condense or shorten the amount of time that might take is just to do fewer of them each week. I think we're hearing from them. It feels like some we're hearing monthly, and maybe that's too often. I guess I'd be open to other commission's thoughts on that, but I think sometimes we're getting updates that feel a little bit repetitive from the previous month. So maybe if it's 1 per meeting. I'm also sensitive to these folks' times, like because this is at the end of our meeting, often like they are sitting on the phone for 2.5 hours waiting to give us a short update and then literally no member of the commission has any input or questions. So I've kind of felt a little like, is this worth their time? But I actually like hearing from the body, you know, if it's a chair. I also wonder if there's a way to kind of do both of these things, right? So like we hear from the chair, and then in instances where a commissioner is also on that body, you know, we give them a minute or so to say, you know, here's what I think, or here's some themes that I think the commission might want to consider. Like I think about BID, you know, and Mickey could provide an update on what the BID is doing and talking about, and then perhaps, you know, it's, you know, me saying, you know, I'd really like the commission to think about this graffiti topic, right? Or I think this is something maybe the commission might want to take up. So I don't know. I mean, I think maybe it's helpful to hear from both, but maybe we just do fewer of them.
Question before we go on, because I don't. So with that thought that you bring, would it be coming from the committee or just something you decided? Commissioner O'Loughlin?
I guess sorry, I'm not sure I understand the
No,
question.
I mean, when you say the chairperson will give an update on what they've been doing, and then the commissioner will come in and say, but here are some ideas that the commission could take up. Will that be coming also from the committee, from the advisory committee, or just from the commissioner?
Yeah, I mean, so I guess I think it's interesting that this used to be the individual commissioner was giving the update. And there might be value to also hearing from the commissioner who is on that body. But I also have liked hearing from the chair of the committee. So maybe it's a little bit of both. I mean, I think, again, it's often at the end of sometimes very long meetings. I think we're tired, they give an update, and there's no back and forth. And I just don't know, is that valuable? So perhaps having both the chair of the committee and the commissioner sort of share out their perspective might open up a little bit more conversation. And again, we're doing too many of them, I think, each meeting, and we're doing them too frequently for each committee. So I think that would be something to consider.
Or maybe we can readjust the agenda, put them up.
That's what I was thinking. It might be worth just putting them at the beginning.
Yeah.
You know, we dealt with this situation when I was on the HCC prior to being on the commission. You know, the HCC has members of many of these boards, including also then participation in even other non-city or non-like decision-making boards. You know, they might go as just sort of ex officio type or almost de facto members because of their respective interests. One thing we did ask them, and I don't think it's an unfair ask, even though I know these are volunteer boards, is because those reports were taking up the first 50% sometimes of the entire HCC meeting, you know, we instituted a policy that said, if you are going to present on that topic, you need to provide in writing the respective information that you're conveying prior to the meeting. And we're going to rely on that generally as sort of the report. And we worked to then make sure, just like any agenda packet that we do here, goes out so everyone could see it and review it. We could have discussion on those topics if needed, but it stopped sort of the just, you know, free-flowing sort of regurgitation of agendas as much. And we did a lot better at synthesizing down the points that needed to be delivered. And it ended up being more efficient. Did we lose out on some things because people didn't prep before the meeting, and thus a topic might have been missed? Absolutely. So it, you know, always asking volunteers to do more, you could miss stuff, but it definitely allowed a much more structured presentation. It also allowed then to know what the commentary was ahead of time. So going to the problem highlighted by Commissioner O'Loughlin, the commissioners knew what was coming and knew if they were going to have questions on that specific area, rather than just silently sitting there because you had to process everything at 6:45.
You know, I'm wondering too, and I know the mayor is good at this, it might be worth just saying, you know, each committee gets 10 minutes and they may not use it all to give their update. And if there are recommendations, like for example, Citizen Conservation Board is sending us, a recommendation, HCC is sending us, they send us recommendations on lots of different things. Make sure that we do have, if they're going to note a recommendation, that we do have that in writing, so that we can be prepared with questions on that. But I'm wondering if it is just, the chair gives them 10 minutes or so, and that way we keep things moving, and also gives us an opportunity to be able to review specific proposals that they want us to consider.
Sounds like you guys are in agreement, and there's good historical perspective on this too, that and Rachel probably could come up, being a volunteer, and I have been that person, so I appreciate this, stresses you out. But if maybe there could be a template for the committees, that, so that they don't have to write a full thing, each time, that, if your committee has recommendations, you could fill something out so that it's easy for them, easy for you. So that's what I'm hearing, that maybe you should consider staggered presentations, from committees, and move it to the top of the agenda, and that perhaps in some circumstances you should hear from both the commissioner and the committee chair, if the commissioner wants to address some issues, to speak to that committee. Does that sound right? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if we need, Rachel.
Go one more. I swear we're almost done on this one. The last item was what Heather had brought up, which is the further items for future agendas. What the items used to say, what this agenda has traditionally said is review of next agenda items for the next meeting as opposed to future items. So that list that I've been sending to you all via email, I want to incorporate into the end of the agenda so that you can add anything else, especially if there's something at the beginning of the commission comments where they want to add items. We have the future items list. We can add it immediately there and move to the next. Then it's no longer an email, and everybody has access to the same information and when it's coming out. Okay. Are you all?
Yeah, I do have a quick question about reviewing the agenda, which we had previously been doing. And I just wonder the value of that. I do think there are instances where the staff is kind of flagging, like, let's put something on an admin meeting, like formally on the agenda to discuss it in advance of the commission's meeting on Monday. But that doesn't seem to be consistent. Like there are items that come up on our commission meeting that I'm like, how did we not talk about this at an admin meeting beforehand? And then there are other ones that are on the admin meeting where we have no comments and it seems pretty straightforward. I would just say, like, I don't want to hash this out today, but I think for you, Rachel, it would be helpful for you and staff to have some guidelines of, are there items that warrant a discussion before a meeting? So that we have a little bit of a sense of what the expectation is, or what your expectation is of staff before we're meeting formally to vote on something. So that's my only additional thought.
I would agree with Commissioner O'Loughlin on that. Again, historically, that's been a placeholder. Sometimes the agenda's not even out at the time before the meeting. And also, what that basically does is it elevates all of the items when it is out on our future agenda for potential conversation. And this is just an example, only. We don't need to make a rule about it. It's just an example. When we did the URD discussions previously, there would be times where we'd be designing a URD, and on Monday we were going to be addressing the statement of blight or the actual shape of the URD. Some pretty substantive questions. Ultimately, people would have questions about moving the boundary, what that would take, and that wouldn't be on our administrative agenda. But we'd have a request to expand the service boundary for wastewater for one parcel on the west side, but that would be an agenda item. And that, so you can't always tell, but in that case, like, you could tell. And like one of those didn't merit any discussion, and it didn't merit any conversation, even at Monday's meeting. The other one got bogged down in a chaotic discussion because now we're in this weird formal meeting session where people want to just ask some of those questions of what the heck is a URD and what is a statement of blight, all of which are much more susceptible to that free-flowing meeting that we're identifying here today. And you can't hit all of those, but some of them very much so. It's like, what was the substantive decision behind that choice? And while this could be a place for that, the problem with it being the dumping ground for it is if you've got 8 agenda items on Monday's meeting and 4 different commissioners each have one item that they're concerned about, you've just threatened to either extend this agenda manifestly out when you've already run over time. So I don't know. I'm not exactly sure what this placeholder is for. If we have items for the next specific agenda that really deserve some further discussion, they probably ought to be in the agenda itself. And then if it's an opportunity to discuss any specific future items, either it should be ones that are flagged by the manager for future discussion. Hey, when do you guys want to discuss this? Or an opportunity for a commissioner to bring up a specific item. Because otherwise, I think what's happened with this historically is it's been the item that we're like, okay, everybody's seen the agenda. Okay, we're going to break the meeting. Good night. And so what's the point of having an agenda item that has no purpose? So I prattled on. I apologize.
This is important. Other thoughts on this one in particular?
One thing I would just say in reference to what Rachel had mentioned previously, I know it's been very helpful for me to see, what we can expect in, 1 to 5, 7 months from now. And I think having that available and figuring out where it makes sense to put other things is helpful. I know, for example, when we had the discussion about in the presentations from Good Sam's and Rocky Mountain Development, I think that it was helpful that when I was getting questions, I could refer to people. We are, this is coming up in January. Make sure you come to this meeting. And so I think that having that available and being able to fill in where we need to, or say, I know we're going to cover this topic. This is a subset of that topic that I'm hearing. Can we also include that in the discussion? I think that's helpful for me. And I also think it's helpful for the community just to know what's actually coming down the pike, because oftentimes, there's not always an understanding that we are getting to something, but it's not going to be, for 2 months or something. So those are just some of my thoughts.
Brenda, if I could ask the manager a question. So Rachel, is kind of you've been doing this with us, the commission, through email, right? I guess I'm asking kind of for the public to understand that we've kind of, as commissioners, have a sense of the things that are out for us in some given time frame. Is your intent here that be also shared with the public, this particular agenda item? Is that kind of why you brought it up?
Yeah, I just want to be consistent. And since it's a new activity for you all, I'm not sure that email is sufficient. It doesn't, if email is sufficient, that's fine. As it says on the email itself, like, this is no commitment. We can't be 100% sure that this is the actual timing, but these are the future topics. They could move just based on emergencies and all of those caveats. But it seems to be something that has helped calm the pace concerns around whether or not, I'll be frank, there's this idea that the staff slow walk things on items. And I wanted you all to see the volume of work that we're actually trying to move through on top of the day-to-day workload that we're doing. So wanted you to see that we're not slow walking. You can see the long list of things that we're trying to get through. That was part of the reasoning that I was sending that to you, just to give you some assurance that we're not forgetting something, or that we're leaving something behind. So you've got that comfort. So that I would say that no, the transparency is great. I'm on 100% on board with that as an idea of the reason for putting it here. But my intention of that list was not that so much as ensuring that you all, as a body who I work for, understand that we're moving things.
Thank you.
You bet.
All right. This was a really
Thank you.
conversation on something that's really important to your work. Any other? Okay, so it looks like we're going to give study sessions a try. Going to give study sessions that change and kind of changing up a little bit. And I know, as I said, some of these, it's not, this isn't like hasn't been done before, or other elements of your thing aren't going to be used, but you're going to really try to use these as a place to prepare, ask questions, ask the hard questions, use the staff in a very, and I mean that in a positive way. Use the staff, engage those committee chairs that are giving their time, your volunteers, just like yourselves in many respects, to get as much information as you can. Maybe ask your committee chairs if they do have substantive requests, recommendations, get a template out to use so that you all are prepared back to doing your homework. Before these meetings, you guys have a lot of homework in general. Ask those committee chairs, though, to write things up for you so that you are all best prepared as well as possible. Consider, and this will probably be in Rachel's purview, asking those committees, that maybe have, staggering their presentations, those that are, there are always committees that are more active than others, just due to, what's happening in the world or their chairs, and possibly putting your resident, your volunteers at the top of the agenda, but being careful to monitor their time. And it sounds like the mayor does that well. Does that sum it up? But again, really depends on you bringing this kind of conversation. You've had a very good free-flowing conversation today on this issue. So hopefully this is the beginning. All right, no objections? Cool. All right, Rachel, should we just, we're running a smidge behind the agenda, but that was so good. We have about 5 minutes so we can put that other spreadsheet up and Rachel can switch screens here. Does everybody need a 5-minute break, or are you okay?
Well, I need more than 5 minutes. No, I'm joking.
I think a break would be good.
Okay, let's see another 5 minute or so break. Everybody can. All right, Rachel will convene here in 5 minutes, 11:31-ish. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So now it's time, to be honest, this is kind of the fun stuff. This is the stuff you're good at. This is the stuff you wanted to do as an elected official. The process stuff, kind of back to that durable triangle, helps you get to the meat and the heart of the matter. And what Rachel asked when we started talking is many communities go through these long, very long strategic planning processes that can take years, actually. But what she, when we were talking, she's looking for some, to be honest, down and dirty strategic outcomes that the community is that the community is well aware of, that you're working on, and that these strategic outcomes and these focus areas underneath those strategic outcomes will eventually be reflected in your budget. So when that, when that constituent comes up to you and says, what are you doing about, what are my tax dollars going for? You could say, you know what? We have, 5 strategic outcomes, and underneath that is potholes. And this is where you can see it in our budget. This is reflected in our budget priorities. We're not just talking about it. We're walking the talk. People always have a lot of questions. I'm sure Montana's no different than Colorado about where their tax dollars are going. And so this is just a good way to begin to organize themselves. So the way Rachel and I envision this is that you all would prioritize your strategic outcomes and your key focus areas. Begin this process today. You began it actually before. And then we would put this out to the community via some public engagement software so that the community knows, and as I think I've told all of you, you know your community, you know the priorities. What comes back to you is not going to be a shock to you. You know your community. But your community needs to know that it's a multi-directional conversation, that you are listening to them, that when they do say something, it's reflected in what you do. And then once you guys hear back from your community, there may be some differences, that maybe there are some surprises that you didn't think about. You decide on it and you go back to them. So all public engagement has to be finished. There has to be a full circle. Too often, you see these listening tours from elected officials. Rachel knows who I'm going to be talking about, but once a certain governor, who now is a senator, did a big expensive listening tour, and he went all over the state. It was a big deal. It cost a lot of money, and he asked people's opinions, and he asked them to come to meetings and meetings and meetings, and then it's like it didn't exist. And those people, there were about several hundred that went to these meetings, were like, wow, didn't I go to a meeting and didn't we say that we were concerned about transportation to the mountains and how this was going to work? No comment, never was reflected in a budget, never was reflected anywhere else. People get really frustrated with that. And so one of the most important tenets of public engagement is that you close your loop. And so that's what I know is we're going to try very, very hard to do, is to close the loop, to make sure when you're asking for feedback, you go right back to them and you tell them, this is what I heard and this is what we're going to do about it. So when I talked to you all, it was so interesting talking policy with you all. I guess because also, we're here in Colorado and we've seen the growth that, you guys are beginning to see. To listen to what you all said, and you all, in some respects, talked about economic development and the growth that's happening in Montana and in Helena, and concerned about how growth is being handled, want to grow smart, don't want to be like Bozeman, don't want to be like Missoula, but take the best practices that those communities have done, and other concerns. So what I wrote in that document is you all had some specific, some of you had a broader statement like, how do we promote health and sustainable growth in Helena? And then you had some specific items. So the way we did that is that those promote healthy and sustainable growth in Helena, those are strategic outcomes. And then there were some tactics that could assure underneath each one. And I asked you to prioritize those. And so that, we could figure out how, what should be done first, what's most important. So Rachel, do you want to tell how you, is A, B, C, D, E, let's represent 5?
Yeah, it's the same. Each of you submitted your strategic outcomes. These are each of them, each commissioner. And you can see there's some synchronizing, and then there's a split here, which is to number 1. So there's some conversation to be had here around, is this number 1? Is it, you can see over here, this is in 2 different spots for 2 additional. So if we were in a commission meeting or in an admin meeting, this would be something where we've got 2 commissioners who don't agree that this is number 1. And they would move, and if we were in an admin meeting, we would move this to a commission meeting and it would potentially get voted on. And then we would move forward. So what the distinction here is, again, back to what Brenda was saying about consensus, is that we're asking you to really think about, are these the kinds of things that you need to move here? So then again, here, the same thing, promote a safe community. Here's growth, excuse me, sorry, growth here. So I think Brenda, it might be really good because there's such variation to really kind of talk them through, what talk the commission through.
Yeah.
Can I ask a quick question? And I maybe should already know the answer to this, but where did this list of 5 come from? Was that generated by the two of you, or is this reflected in a document that the commission had already seen?
This list of 5 broad topics.
Yeah, they were in your report.
Expanding government and health and sustainable growth in Helena. Those 5. Yeah, what I did, Heather, is I based it off your individual comments, and then
okay,
I'm just gonna somebody talked about, yes, that safety and the community is important. Safety of the community is important, and so I grouped that into that one. And you notice there was a 1 bullet point, but what I did is I took, some of you talked about something broad, like, yeah, we have to have very livable neighborhoods. And then some of you had very specific items that would fall under that. So some of you didn't mention the, neighborhood livability by specifically, some of you did, but some of you then listed very specific items that would be under that. So I took some, to be honest, I took some license with that, but we could change that. I mean, this, to be honest, Rachel and I kind of took a first stab at what I heard, and then I ran it past Rachel to see if it sounded right. But certainly these are, could be, it's yours. This is kind of I'll be honest, a jumping off point. So all could be changed. This was just a place to start this conversation.
Okay, yeah, that's helpful. I guess I just kind of noticed that, there are some that have seem to have some pretty specific policy, proposals or concepts, and then others that were a little bit more, like promoting a safe community. I think there was only 1 bullet under that, and it was like still pretty general. So yeah, so that's helpful background to know where they came from.
Yeah. So just talking a little bit about this, as I did say, the thing that did stand out most in the conversation was this issue of looks like if you were, and as I said, if any of you want to, change any of these out, I think some would add a section about infill, but it sounded like if we look at just at the top, that this issue of, you want to be a high performing government and you want a very good, neighborhood livability. That seems like those are, 2 issues that important to all of you. Thoughts on this, or when you were thinking about this, anybody want to just kick this off, just in terms of free-flowing conversation?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. One thing I was thinking about, I think what's pretty clear, and this is something that I try to think about, when we're approaching anything, is what improves quality of life for people. And I think that is pretty consistent across the list of what some of our focuses are. I know one thing for me is that, especially going through some of the key areas of focus, and I think that there was definitely overlap between key areas of focus that could fit into different parts of the strategic outcomes. But one thing I was thinking about after reading the full report, but then also looking at the strategic outcomes and key areas of focus are, in order to achieve any of these tactics, basically, or strategies, we have to have, a government that works and that is, firing on all cylinders if we want to do it well and do it for long-term impact. So that was one of the things I was thinking about is, do we have the strong foundation to accomplish all of these things on?
So you were basically saying, while you're looking at everything through what's quality of life for your residents, but first for you would be a high performing government in order to ensure that.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other thoughts? And again, we don't, one of the ideas, if they're, in terms of those five, these five broad categories, and Heather is right, that some are, some of you have been thinking about certain policy ideas for a while, and we're ready to go. But in terms of for the public to know, hey, you're speaking at Rotary, and you say, somebody asks, what are the goals of the commission for 2021? And you say, yeah, so we want to have a high performing government, and these are, and underneath that, these are some goals we have for that. Or somebody's going to ask you, I'm sure, about growth, because that's your hot issue. We want health and sustainable growth in Helena, and somebody's going to say, and how are you going to do that? And you could say, we've got 3 ideas this year that we're going to work on. Infill and smart development, housing, and other things. Do these strategic outcomes, what do you think of them as a broad?
Can I ask a clarifying question, Brenda? As staff, just as a staffer, prioritizing them means that I would push the team to do this work first, whatever the number one is. And I'm wondering if it actually matters to the commission, the priority, or is the most important element that these are the primary areas of focus within this commission, and it doesn't actually matter the priority as long as we are working on these 5 priorities for the year, or 6 or whatever. So if you all agree that these are the 5 priorities, then we don't have to prioritize those activities so long as we're moving them forward in our communications. So that, just asking the clarifying, do we need to have them prioritized?
I think you and I talked about that too. And that what I've seen from other communities is I don't think they prioritize, meaning if they want to, they want a high performing government and they want neighborhood livability. And the staff prioritizes these 5 things. And that's what the commission articulates as your message as well to the community when they're asking you. And it aligns with your budget. Some communities, when they do their budget, I'm just gonna, I know some, for instance, would say, promote healthy and sustainable growth in Helena. There would be a variety of things under that in terms of your budget issue. You would have your economic development budget items. You would have, you might have certain health, you could put definitely, you put different, you can align your budget this way so that the community understands what money is going to what strategic outcome. So this is what I heard from you when I interviewed you. I heard these 5 buckets and those specific policy issues that are underneath. But what do you think of these 5 buckets as terms of your strategic outcomes to begin to give the staff some guideposts?
I liked them. I do think the one thing that I think you can see this, but I do think that in that assuring the high performing government, and it's alluded to in the key areas of focus, but I do think that includes, I really like that idea of closing the loop, and I think that that is part of the citizen and community engagement. Another piece too that I know that, or I believe that there's interest on the full commission is, how do we really, how do we update the things that we're doing to make our community more sustainable and more resilient, and pursuing green initiatives that when, for example, Pat presented his report the other meeting, it was clear that we needed to do some updating on what was actually relevant. And so I think, a lot of these things, especially looking at the key areas of focus, I do think there are things that can run parallel and in tangent with one another. And I think a lot of them don't happen without other items coming first. And so I do think it's building progress off of each step. And a lot of these things can happen in collaboration and parallel to one another.
Thanks. Other ideas just on those topical, those kind of high level strategic outcomes? They are high level, and right, Emily and Heather alluded to this. The policy, there's no doubt the devil is in the details in some of those policies, very specific policy ideas. Again, a lot of this is done in communities, and you'll see it all over the country, in order to help align when you're getting into those budget issues and you commute and you're to be able to align your budget with your priorities.
Yeah, and Brenda, it's funny. I was thinking devil's in the details exactly the moment you said it. I look at something like improved neighborhood livability, right? And that means not just two things. It means 5,000 things in the city of Helena to two different people, right? Whether or not we're towing enough junk vehicles is like number one priority for some people in our community, and it's not for others. Whether we get $500,000 more into our housing trust is number one for some of us, and completely zero or negative on some people's lists, right? But we will all point back to that one as improving neighborhood livability. Right, so it really is going, yes, all five of these, I don't think any of us are going to be like, no, I don't support a safe community, right? Like deprioritize safe communities, or like, no, I really don't want healthy and sustainable growth. Let's make it unhealthy and totally out of control. It's ultimately a subjective, and when we ultimately have to set those budget priorities and allocate dollar amounts, that's where it's going to come out as to what this community truly is, right? Which comes first, right? Assuring a high-performing government, or putting into place the policies that make your community say, oh, hey, like my government believes in these things, and therefore I have faith in it as a high-performing government. Right? That's a chicken and egg thing. Former Commissioner Pira used to say, right? You build this from the ground up with the right progressive policies, and you end up having a community that understands the openness and transparency and goodness of its government. Some say, you have to just start with public meetings, right? There go my people. I must figure out where they're going in order to determine, how to lead them there. It's different philosophical approaches on all of this, but it all bleeds together. And so I think these are fine. But ultimately, we're going to have to be back here, whether it's before the budget or during the budget process, because I can point to multiple places in these where I could put the same item. And I can point to places in them where there's going to be a fundamental disagreement as to whether or not that thing that I want $100,000 for, that Commissioner O'Loughlin's like, absolutely not, we don't even fund that, really constitutes the promotion of healthy or sustainable living, if that makes sense. So I'm okay with them, but we are, to really move forward on this, we are going to have more time, and I'm not sure that these get us fully to where we need to be before a budget process starts. I feel like we may be hanging the manager out to dry a little bit. And hopefully, Rachel can weigh in on her thoughts on it, but she can come in and be like, look, here are all these ideas and tag each one back to a specific line. And four of us could be like, that's bananas. We totally disagree, but she'd be right. Just not subjectively when you get down to the bottom. So I'm in agreement, but we definitely, if these are where we're starting, there's 2 or 3 more steps before budgetary time.
These are definitely just a starting point. Just again, it's like when you write a paper and somebody writes the draft and then you take the good red pen and it's so much easier. Basically, I wrote the draft and you guys can take the red pen and improve upon these. I will say that, this is probably fodder for a study session. And you can improve upon those, on these strategic outcomes. If you want to add ones, give it some time to think about it. But other comments on that?
I guess Brenda, I would agree with Commissioner Halliday. As far as strategic outcomes go, the 5 buckets, as you call it, makes sense to me. I did have a hard time sort of putting things that were important to me and what I think are important to the community into, plugging them in. That was tricky, and I don't think I was particularly overly successful. And I think it is going to take, further discussion and red penning, as you say. So those are my thoughts at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and each community is different, but it could provoke, hopefully a good conversation amongst you, and about choices that you have to make. And back to that, about making tough decisions. You're the ones that have to make tough decisions. That's, especially when it comes around the budget. You are making those tough decisions, and hopefully this can give you, as you're making some decisions, a framework for articulating those decisions. And some, let's face it, some you'll win and some you'll lose and some you're going to compromise on. And, not everybody gets their own way, but you'll be able to say, yeah, hopefully as a commission, you could say we agreed on these 3, maybe there's only 3 strategic outcomes. Maybe they're more narrow this year. And under those 3 strategic outcomes, we have, 6 specific policies we'd like to work on this year. And that's what you communicate with the public.
What do you think about the areas of focus then? Do you guys feel like commissioners, do you all feel like that those areas of focus had more depth to them if you were to be called to question how you're doing in the key elements that the public is really asking you to address? Do you feel like those reflected more closely with your priorities? I guess what I'm wondering is if the words chosen within these 5 are just too broad, if we move to the key areas of focus that Brenda has brought up, if that gets us closer to getting your true thoughts around the priorities and in more synchronicity there. Just,
when I was reading through this, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask, what are the areas of focus? Are those the sub bullets? Is that what you're referencing?
correct.
Okay.
When I was reading through this, what it reminded me of, and I appreciated it, was how, for example, the growth policy is mapped out, where you kind of have these big, broad pillar goals, and then the specifics of actually how you get there, and other ideas are these key areas of focus. So I don't mind having, broader, pillars that are the strategic outcomes. I also think that that gives the community, I guess, some areas where they can focus if they're interested in one thing or the other, because I do think that, it's a lot. The key areas of focus are important, but I also think it's probably a lot to take in if you are a citizen that's reviewing all of them. And I think being able to focus on an area that you might be more interested in makes it a little bit more accessible.
Yeah, so it felt to me that the neighborhood livability and promoting healthy and sustainable growth felt like there were tangible things in those that I feel like we have had conversations, and it feels like there's some consensus around, at least like building out some work sessions and reflecting those two items in our budget. There are others that I don't think we have really discussed or there's consensus. I mean, providing a diverse cultural and recreation, like that's fine, but we haven't really had conversations about a park and rec district. That sounds like maybe it's something that came up during Brenda's one-on-ones. And I would just say, I don't think we're there, right? To say, let's put that on the list. Nor is that something that just the city of Helena could decide. So that one feels like, I'd recommend we take that off. Maybe it's, if you want to keep on the kind of the higher level sort of thing, fine. But I'd want Rachel and the staff to map out how we get to a district, right? And what's the goal there? Safe community actually feels the opposite, right? Like that sub bullet tells me nothing about what that means. And if we want to include promote safe community, I guess that's fine. But that sub bullet just doesn't tell me much. I know that there are 2 members of this 5-member commission that prioritize high performing government. I would say, what are the specifics, right? I think hiring a PIO, is that a priority? I think that's a priority of the city manager, and I think we support that. So that's great. I would just say what felt missing, why I wouldn't have prioritized that one, is that it says nothing about like service oriented, right? Like providing good service to our community. It's like really more of sort of what we've spent the last several hours talking about, like inward looking, what are we as a body doing? But it felt like if there was a sub bullet in there that we're providing solid, high quality service to our constituents, I'd be all for that.
Okay.
So that's my feedback.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo that, and again, I'll just go to an example because I'm just example focused on these things, right? Exactly on that service feedback. Okay, so how do we provide those services? How do we make someone feel like they got that service and was followed up on, right? So what's the tangible delivery? About what, a year and a half ago, I think the then PIO implemented the My Helena app, right? Which lets you snap that picture to describe the thing that's the issue. If you want to register, they will let you know when it's done, right? And I can't tell you how many people I've encountered who love the thing, whether they post as an anonymous individual or whether they have an account. Like, so that's a tangible, right? And that's a tangible that builds directly toward that. And so that's something then that when it's presented, you can put a line item on and say, this is going to cost us $5,000 a year. Is that a recurring budget amount that the commission wants to do for the purposes of, right, building an effective government, right? Promoting a high performing government. There's a tangible thing that, right, you can speak through your budget. And that's where I did when I looked at these. I really looked at specific bullets to try to figure out which ones were we're driving towards those items that could be legitimate action items that a dollar amount can ultimately be attached to. Building trust, we could spend 10 million and still not have trust from some people because we wouldn't know what that is. What are the specific pieces of trust that we're buying through either human time, structural implementation, budgetary aspects? And so, that's why those two, livability and healthy, sustainable growth, really have things that are closer to specific tangibles that can be delivered on. And as Commissioner Dean mentioned, with say the growth plan has action items under there. Again, they still leave questions open, right? Some would come in and say tax abatements for everyone equals economic growth. They don't, but some would say that. Therefore, we're saying, well, let's support effective and innovative economic health initiatives. You've got a binary choice there. Do tax abatements support? Do tax abatements not support? And two people are going to disagree on the answer to that question. So that's why, again, so much of this, in order to really figure out those priorities, you might be able to do your safe community, even if it was like number 4 on everyone's list, you might be able to pull that one off for a $500,000 investment, right? Whatever that is in your budget. And so it could be easily checked off, while some of the stuff you want to do in these others will be far more difficult because they'll be multi-year projects and they will take repeated funding over time to get to. So again, I've said it before, we're just really going to have to go down to specifics as to, one, how these are prioritized, and two, what prioritizing means within the hierarchy of prioritization. Ooh, that was a terrible word salad.
Those are certainly good comments.
Can I ask a question? Do you feel like there's a distinction? And I almost wonder if this is the staff work plan. To Heather's point early on, I need Rachel to tell me what that means. And that's how the staff would implement in a Parks and Recreation District. So that's the question of, absolutely, that is exactly what you would ask me to do. But the bigger picture for me is, are these actually your broad goals? Are these actually your broad focus areas? And then, of course, the team will be doing their own execution work plan specific to these items, which will, of course, fit within these. But and we would share that too. My question, I guess, is, do you need to have the work plan in order to make decisions around the broad pieces of the policy that Brenda has suggested here?
And I'll just jump in and then I'll shut up, hopefully for a bit. But I mean, I think trying not to be critical on it, because I think these are all aspirational and great ideas. I'm not clear what component of current city operations or of things I don't think we're currently doing, say, but should be, is not covered in these 5 categories. And that's where I'm struggling very much to be up here at this extremely high level, because I feel like we've just said everything about city operations, or anything that I aspire to, or maybe 2 other commissioners in conjunction aspire to, are important. And it feels a little bit Rorschach-y on that sense. I'm not sure what we've said is not, what aspect of is going on right now that anyone would look at these and go, oh, but boy, we better stop doing that. I think everyone could look at ongoing city operations right now and say, well, fits in that bucket. And that's where I'm just a little bit afraid that we actually obtained anything other than saying, yeah, these are all good.
Thank you.
So one thing that I would just add, I do think, like, for example, in the key areas of focus that fall under the high performing government, I mean, I do think that there are budget items that have been previously discussed, and I think a lot of them were brought by Manager Harlow-Schultz too, of, for example, the budget tool to align, what our priorities are to the budget that's a visual for the public to see, or the, system to better allow folks to provide public input in, multiple ways. So I do think that there are, things that we can do. And I mean, I know that this part of this builds to get to the budget, but I also think part of it, from what I understand, and Brenda or Rachel, correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, we're really looking at, you know, what do we need to be thinking about over the next year? And I think to one of the points that was earlier, a lot of these things are multi-year projects, but, you know, what are the first steps that we take, and how do we solicit information from the public to make sure that we are on the right track for, you know, key area X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, so that is the idea, and I agree. You know, I think for people who admittedly, I think it's sometimes very difficult to look at these strategic outcomes because they are at 50,000 feet, and they're not as tangible as is that we're gonna pay 20 miles of road this year. Which is, a very strategic, policy implementation. I think what, why communities do this is, again, it just puts a framework, what you all know. I mean, I think in your heads, intellectually, you all know those 5 things. That's what you do. It's all here for you. But I think for the public, and for your own work and to guide your own work and I know that lots of times you can make something squeeze into anything, but you can squeeze, everybody can make a rationale. I could squeeze something into something. I could make an argument to squeeze one into this bucket when it, because I probably can. But the question is, in terms of just being able to say, yeah, these are the 3 things that are guiding our work this year. So maybe to Heather's point that diverse Parks and Rec district, that's maybe down the road, you scratch that. Because that, that needs some study, that's going to need some work. Maybe that goes on a further agenda, that goes away. Maybe you guys agree as a team that this year you're going to work on 3 strategic outcomes, meaning a healthy and sustainable growth. And maybe you need to change that. Maybe that means, is that economic growth? Maybe that's not specific enough for you. You want to promote healthy and sustainable growth. You know that's on the minds of your constituents because you're hearing it all the time. And improving neighborhood livability. Maybe those 2 for this next year, because they're they've got very tangible items. Maybe for this commission and for the next 11 months, those are the right strategic outcomes for you. And while assuring a high-performing government is important, maybe it's, that goes, I mean, I know it's important and you all agree. I know you all want to govern efficiently, otherwise you would have just spent the last 4 hours here. And there are some line items, exactly what Emily said, that are being attached to that, but maybe, maybe for this year, it's numbers 2 and 4 right now. That's, and you can tell your constituents, not that you're ignoring, you want to have a safe community and you want high-performing government and you want all sorts of other stuff, but, you could just say, yeah, for the next 11 months, the 5 of us, we're focused on this and we're focused on the policies underneath that. What would you think about that? You're thinking that you've got 5 minutes to go and lunch is waiting. That's what you're thinking. Possibility? Rachel? Anybody? Sean?
I'd say of the 3 that were placed down at the bottom, I'm assuming that's Rachel doing that, but those are quite aspirational and as I looked at the assure a high-performing government, I think we sort of began to address that with the discussion of norms and guiding principles and that sort of thing. So generally these 3 that she's placed at the bottom, I'm okay with it. I think it gets down into the specifics of each to determine what's budgetarily important to us.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
That's Heather, okay. Emily?
Yep, I'm good. And I think, you know, especially if this is just focused on what's in the budget and not necessarily, you know, how are we operating, that makes sense.
I mean, look, you're still gonna have like, you know, you've got normal stuff that you put in the budget that.
Well, and I think that
You know,
a lot of,
days before, you know.
yeah, and I do think that that staff are doing a lot of these things already. For example, Miss Danielson in our last meeting discussed how she's looking at, you know, online payment systems that actually, you know, track with your account. So I mean, I think that's all part of, and I think what Commissioner Lachlan was getting to, you know, providing high quality service. I think, you know, that personally, I think that we should always be focused on how are we improving, you know, how we operate.
Well, and maybe that should be, you know, that could be back in a norm. Back too is that you always want to focus on high quality service because, you know, that's probably.
I think that'd be totally appropriate.
Mayor, are you okay? Where are you? You there? Wait, where'd you go?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Okay, are you fine with these three?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Commissioner Halliday, are you okay with these three?
They work for me. I mean, I'll just say, I've always said you can legislate policy, you can't legislate culture. And these may be guiding principles. At the end of the day, it's the decisions we make with regard to the specific tangibles that determine, one, whether we're following those guiding principles. And if we're right, and we'll disagree, but if we're right on at least some kind of majority shakeout of them, and we have a manager and staff who are working to implement them, right? That ultimately gets to your cultural question. Are you assuring a high-performing government? Are you building trust with the community? Only then can you get there. And so you can't legislate trust. I can't pass a law that says you must trust me. That's a little scary. But you can take tangible steps based on these values, attach them to dollar amounts, and put them into place and follow the processes that'll get you there. And these three, you know, they provide good, high level pieces. How we implement them, what tangibles we place on them, that's going to decide whether we actually have a high functioning government, high performing government.
Yep, you know, that old whatever adage from the 80s, you know, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Something like some of those guys said that, you know. That's probably true. Well, great. Okay. Well, it's 12:17. And we're supposed to be done by 12:30, and I think there needs to be time for public comment too. Rachel, you have anything to add in here?
I do not. I think this was a really it was a really heavy agenda. So to get as much as you all did today, Donna, I think it's fantastic. Thank you very much for what you did today, because it's very, very helpful. And thank you, Brenda.
Well, thank you. Anybody else want to say anything else before we're done and you guys are to live your rest of your Saturday?
I just want to thank you for taking up the time to assist us in this process. We appreciate what you've done, and thanks to Rachel and the staff.
I agree.
I really enjoyed, to be honest, talking to all of you, learning about Montana and seeing the similar, you know, just with my own policy nerdiness, seeing the similarities and differences, what's going on up there, what's going on here in the West, and learning from all of you. So it was really interesting. To be honest, not everybody's as interesting as you, and so appreciate it a lot.
Hey, Brenda, Because we didn't get through the next steps, which is the public engagement and some deeper dives, what's your recommended next steps?
On that part, I think we could probably write something up for that, a proposal on the public engagement. I think they're well aware of kind of your plan to use budget engagement and bang the table, right?
They are.
So the idea was those three strategy outcomes that you just listed, to put those ideas out to the public as basically if they were listening to this meeting today saying, you know, what does the public agree with those strategic outcomes, just letting them know. And some of the ideas you have, those key focus areas that, and if you have others other than what is on that, I think just submit that to Rachel. That's just what you told me, but you may have other ideas. We were thinking about putting that out to the public so that they're involved in this process from, to be honest, from the beginning, to see what you're thinking about. And then you can be able to see the results of that. Maybe they'll be like, yep, I think infill is going to be critical. And these are my ideas for how you ought to address it, commission. You know, open space acquisition is going to be big. And I hope you're thinking about that. And you'll be like, yeah, maybe not this year, maybe not. But that we get some input from the public before you make, and then you'll be able to agree on those. You'll be able to formally agree on these. I think you have to formally agree on them, right, at a meeting. And then again, you'll be communicating the results of that back to the public so that you're constantly communicating. That bang the table software allows you to do quick polls, quick surveys. People can be in and out of there in 30 seconds, kind of what you were talking about, Commissioner Holliday. It's just that feedback that people really like. So what do you think about that? And we can write this. I think I wrote this in my proposal to Rachel a little bit, but yeah. I can write this a little further down and you can take it up at a meeting.
So we would be taking these top three, standing up the bang the table software system, which is basically an online link on our website where the community can go in, they can watch this video if they want to, they can look at your report, all of the information that the commission's been given, reflect on what is being proposed as the top three for budget, and then provide their input. Do we also provide all the others, or just those top three? It sounds like we're at just the top three.
I would do those top three.
Okay.
I would do those top three because that's what you all agreed upon, that you kind of want to say to them. I mean, what I would frame it to is I'd say, hey, Helena, you know what? We spent some time thinking about this and we've listened to you over, you know, we've been listening. These are your three, you know, what we feel like in the next 11 months are our strategic outcomes. We're thinking about it a lot. Here are some sub ideas. What do you think of these three strategic outcomes? Let us know. They'll say, yeah, I think this is important. No, you know, you're going to have people that have other ideas, you know, you know them because they'll stop in the grocery store and they're telling you. But yeah, just that you're communicating with them, you know, prior to the budget ideas. Budget engagement is huge this year, just based on what's happening again in our country, what's happening with peace reform. There are people, this is Government Finance Officers Review Association has new recommendations for municipalities on how to approach this. So you guys will be at the, at the cusp of what's innovative, but reaching out to the public, making sure you're bringing them into your thought process.
And then I'll provide updates to the commission under my items in the agenda, and then continue to keep that we have in the budget calendar identified the times in which we're doing the outreach back and forth. So Brenda will be with us all along this process for this engagement as well. So I'll drag her into our meetings too to help provide updates as we get moving.
Right. As I said, every poll, everything is showing that the public is highly, highly engaged right now. They're highly engaged into where their money's going, what the priorities are in cities, and and so that two-way conversation, even though sometimes you won't get the response that you want, and you're trying something new. It takes a little while, to change the culture in a community too. But I think just what you said, people love having that app on their phone. They're using the app on their phone. They're beginning to, if anything about the pandemic is we have seen the importance that, people are communicating digitally, they're getting used to it. And for those that don't have that, and that's always an accessibility issue, Rachel, we're going to need to talk about that best way for, if you've got a phone, a voicemail set up for people to leave comments. You don't want those people who aren't comfortable on the web or on their phone to be left out.
Right. Those community organizations were the second layer to reaching those who are hard to reach to the organizations in the community that people trust. Yeah.
All right.
Mayor, it's back to you.
That's easy. Well, do we have any final comments? Hey, I didn't turn this thing off yet. I see it look like going off. I got this gavel, Do we have any final comments? If not, do we have any raised? At this time, we'll open up for public comments. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone from the public?
Mr. Mayor, Commissioners, I have received no written public comment in a Q&A, and I've got no one with their hand raised.
Okay, the time is 12:25, so we'll give them 45 seconds. If we don't have any raised hands, I will adjourn this meeting ASAP. It's 4 hours overdue. Okay, if no final comments, this meeting is formally adjourned.